Hello and welcome to Six Part. Today I'm gonna start a new series. What if Deku with no core became number one hero? Part 1. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
Izuku has been aware since he was 4 years old that all men are not created equal. However, the universe always finds new ways to remind him of his worthlessness, just when he believes he has a firm grasp on what it means to be quirkless in a society full of extraordinary abilities. He has been attempting to convince himself and everyone else that it wasn't true in everything he has done thus far. That he, too, could be a hero, that he could be useful despite his diagnosis. However, he feels more worthless than ever as he creeps home today, exhausted and hollow. Izuku was powerless to stop Kacchan from dying today. To ward off the irritated tears, he roughly presses the palm of his hand against his eye. What was going through his mind? It had been crazy to run out like that when not even the heroes on the scene had been prepared to deal with the delicate situation. Fortunately for him, All Might showed up unexpectedly to stop the sludge monster, otherwise, they would have both perished. Meeting All Might would normally make him feel better, but the number one had already left before he could ask any of the hundreds of questions he had on his mind. He seemed to have sensed that Izuku's lack of eccentricity wasn't worth any more of his time. All Might's single punch left him sprawled on the ground next to Kacchan, trembling from the adrenaline and covered in sludge from the light rain. He felt as though he had just missed something significant. One of the local heroes had pulled him to his feet before he had a chance to comprehend what had happened. He had thought bitterly of the same heroes who had watched helplessly as Kacchan suffocated in front of them. Initially, there had been congrats and admiration, but naturally, that ended when they started inquiring about his peculiarity. As usual, their admiration devolved into a tirade about his folly and recklessness, and their joy gave way to disgust. He had heard it before, but this time it seemed to pierce even more deeply. Perhaps it's because, like everyone else, All Might swept in and ignored him. Perhaps he was even more exhausted and exposed than usual as a result of the adrenaline and anxiety that had first driven him forward. Or perhaps it was the hero's admiration for Kacchan's bravery in the face of hardship while they stood there lecturing him for carrying out their duties. The glare from his old friend that he would have preferred to die than accept the assistance of a quirkless nothing was more painful than the double standard. Kacchan and Izuku haven't gotten along well in a while. Which is a polite way of saying that for the last 10 or so years, Kacchan has been making his life miserable. Izuku has always respected the other boy's strength and drive for success, despite the fact that Kacchan frightened and angered him. What prompted him to act was seeing a powerful, energetic Kacchan with that terrified expression, but the look Kacchan gave him later made Izuku question whether he should just learn to stop butting in and realize that he isn't good for anything. He had managed to collect his dispersed possessions and evade the inquisitive reporters and nagging heroes. Few people recognized Izuku's involvement in the battle, and none of them bothered to question him. Since it's practically a quirk in and of itself, the quirkless might as well be invisible in this society. If it weren't so tiring, he'd laugh. As a result, Izuku staggers home, feeling both hyperaware of his surroundings and somewhat dazed. He is unsure of his next course of action, since no one, not even his teachers, society, or the number one himself, was willing to give him the opportunity to do more. All he knows to do is dream. It's the only thing he has left to do. However, could they be correct? He didn't really accomplish anything back there, really. He hurried in before his brain caught up with his foolish legs, but he was unable to save either Kacchan or himself. Perhaps it was time for him to abandon his naive aspirations of becoming a hero. Deku. The irate cry instantly causes Izuku to freeze. Behind him, he sees Kacchan, who appears to have fled the crime scene, breathing heavily and angrily. Why was Kacchan here now when he had already passed his house? The blonde yells, "I never asked for you to come help me." He looks more angry than Izuku has ever seen him, but he doesn't appear to be attacking and there are no explosions coming from his hands. Izuku stiffens and braces himself for the worst anyhow. With one last sneer, Kacchan turns on his heels and stalks back to his house, leaving Izuku a little taken aback by the unusual encounter. "I didn't need to be saved, okay? I could have taken care of myself. You're so goddamn useless, Deku. What were you thinking? You didn't do shit. Stay out of my fucking way, I don't owe you anything." Izuku blinks as Kacchan walks away, a new emotion beginning to fend off all of his internal rage and emptiness. Relief. Kacchan was alright. He was no longer in pain and gradually drowning in sludge, nor was he afraid. He makes Izuku ill by releasing pent-up anger, fear, and despair, but still. Izuku remained pleased that the boy he had once referred to as a friend was still alive. Izuku gives himself a warm smile and heads back home. Kachan was correct. He didn't actually accomplish anything and ultimately just obstructed the path of the true heroes, but that isn't the point. The point is that he had contributed to his friend's survival, regardless of how minor he was. He raises his head, repositions his shoulders, and moves forward with a renewed sense of purpose. The road to number 1 might as well be Jupiter, and Izuku has no illusions of being a true hero. However, that does not preclude him from being a hero in his own right. They also required smaller heroes for smaller tasks. Not all heroes were All Might or Endeavor. There wouldn't be much he could do and it wouldn't be the most glamorous job, but it would be better than nothing. He quickens his pace and rushes home, grinning at the thought. Perhaps this incident will persuade his mother to allow him to enroll in self-defense classes at last. Maybe, just maybe, someone will need a quirky, unique person like him someday. He could continue honing his analytical skills and research strength-building regimens. Damn sludge monster, All Might, who is now Yagi Toshinori in his true form, mutters a curse in English as he clings to his wound and stumbles home. His throat was clogged with foamy blood, and his breathing was harsh and ragged. He acts as though he is unaware of the terrified mother in front of him, who quickly pushes her infant stroller across the street when she spots him. Even though he doesn't blame her, the pain is still there. All Toshinori had wanted to do was grab some groceries. In addition to being quiet, the small city where he had relocated was also closer to Yue than his previous apartment had been. He leaves Might Tower early today to go grocery shopping on his way home, coughing wetly into his fist. Naturally, he had to encounter a raging monster and have to save the day. He was All Might, and Nana would not have expected her successor to be any less. He had hoped for an easy capture because he had nearly used up One for All for the day, but the monster had been, as the saying goes, slippery. When the creature started up a street drain, Toshinori nearly got it, but it changed its mind at the last minute and pursued it further through the sewers. The worst part is that when he was barely clinging to One for All, he lost sight of the damn thing. He found the monster again thanks to a scream, for better or worse. He had discovered a horrifying scene. A young child buried in the sludge, obviously scared and unable to get away despite his strong strangeness. Another boy had also been present, plain and small, trying to save his friend by frantically clawing at the monster. Without any delay, All Might smashed that monster into small, controllable fragments and dragged the kids to safety. Cheers, the sound of cameras clicking, and sighs of relief filled the air, but Toshinori could only focus on the slow steam rising from his body, which was mercifully covered by the rain. All Might had jumped into the air like the regal hero he is, grinning and making the required promises. He landed in an alley a short distance away, where Toshinori took his place and immediately spat up a good deal of blood. He simply hasn't had a good day. Now, without his groceries and feeling completely exhausted, he is walking home and frightening young mothers. Toshinori rubs his eyes and reflects on how, as a child, he had aspired to be a hero. If he had understood the true meaning of heroism, pain and putting aside weakness to please the public, he questions whether he would have been so eager. Unhappily, his mouth twists. That's not how he truly feels. It's simply been a long day. He primarily considers what he will eat tonight since his groceries are gone and how he will explain this catastrophe to Tsukauchi, who will be understandably angry about the mess he left behind, as he strolls. Though it is typically in the back of Toshinori's mind, bouncing around without ever quite settling, he doesn't consider his growing need for a successor. In his illustrious career, he has saved millions of boys, but he certainly doesn't think about the 2 boys he saved earlier. Despite his advanced age and the weight of the world, he still feels as though he has missed something. Something significant. By the time Toshinori enters his neighborhood, Midoriya Izuku is being encouraged to not allow his eccentricity to stand in the way of his dreams. Despite walking in different directions, they both feel as though an opportunity passed them by without any prior notice. Far, far away in another universe, Midoriya Izuku encounters All Might, the number 1 hero, for the 3rd time that day and is presented with an irresistible opportunity. Neither of them is aware of this. In this one, however, the hero and his possible successor keep going in different directions without realizing how much effort it will take to get back on track. Izuku needed to mentally and physically toughen up if he was going to join Yue. There was almost nothing heroic about him at the moment. He had to start taking things seriously if he was going to make any progress. Izuku promised the night after the sludge incident that he would do everything in his power to pass Yue's entrance exam. His 10 months of hell had suddenly started. Izuku got up early every morning to go for runs, and every evening he performed crunches, push-ups, and weightlifting. Even though he was completely worn out, he was unable to slow down. Building himself was something he had to do quickly. But he had to be clever about it. He would have to fight smarter, not harder, to match the eccentricities of the hero kids. Exercise was fine, but Izuku knew that if he wanted to succeed, he needed a qualified instructor. Persuading his mother to allow him to enroll in martial arts classes wasn't too difficult in the end. When he clarified that he was only interested in self-defense, he had fought off the guilt that was gnawing at the back of his throat. As he researched all the martial arts styles that would best suit his needs, he told himself that it was better this way. Before taking the initial step, Izuku prepared a plan and studied his options for a week. He made the decision to begin simply. There was a free after-school Aikido club at his middle school. He had always chosen hero chasing over after-school activities, but he needed to step up if he wanted to become Japan's first quirkless hero. But it turned out that simply getting into the class was more difficult than he had first imagined. He was repeatedly told he couldn't join for ever more ludicrous reasons by the instructor. It was not long before he realized that he probably did not want to deal with the inconvenience of accommodating the only oddball child in the school. Naturally, this only strengthened his resolve. It wasn't until Izuku's mother intervened and threatened to approach the school board that they decided it would be simpler to simply allow him to join. As a quirkless person, you take what you can get, even if it was a hollow victory. The majority of people were content to ignore him, so the club itself wasn't too bad. Izuku practiced before and after school, pushed himself in every meeting, and took in as much information as he could. Building up his strength and endurance from the bottom was exhausting, but he made progress bit by excruciating bit. Even though Aikido is a powerful defensive art, it was insufficient. He also needed to learn more offensive moves if he was serious about becoming a professional. Izuku's research had led him to a small academy that was just what he was looking for, located nearly an hour away. He therefore informed his mother that he would be late one afternoon and boarded the train after school, shaky with anxious expectation the entire time. He only needed to get to the starting line, which was this. Despite its modest size, the academy was well maintained and tucked away. After discreetly entering and explaining his predicament to the receptionist, Izuku was led back to the dojo, where he waited for 5 and then 10 minutes. At last, the door opened, and a tall, slender man entered. His stern eyes and thin face had grown a few days. His black hair, with a receding hairline, was pulled back into an untidy bun. "I'm not taking any more students," the man said sternly, his dark eyes moving disinterestedly up and down Izuku's body. He folded his arms across his chest. "Especially undisciplined children who think they can walk in off the streets and learn a martial art like it's some sort of game," he said. He nodded brusquely and turned to leave, saying, "The door is that way. I hope the rest of your afternoon is spent doing something more productive." Izuku screamed in desperation, clenching his fingers into his pants, balling up the material, and forcing himself to make eye contact when Rikimaru turned back with a bored expression. "Your name is Rikimaru Daiki, you're 39 years old, and your quirk is rooting, which allows you to stick yourself to any surface you touch and not be moved. You're something of a local celebrity in the martial arts world. You came onto the scene 20 years ago with no official training and no sponsors to support you. You lost more than you won at first, but as you learned the rules of organized martial arts, you began taking in victory after victory. In interviews, you said you learned to fight on your own when, in fact, you probably learned during your time living on the streets and the 3 years you spent in reform school. You officially retired from professional fighting 2 years ago and you opened this academy. They say you're notoriously picky with your students, taking only those you consider worthy regardless of how much they can pay you." Izuku clenched his teeth and turned away from the man to glare at the floor, felt tears streaming down his cheeks, his eyes. He made an effort to stop them, but he was unable to do so because he was too desperate and full of want. Izuku took a moment to dab at his eyes before re-establishing eye contact. Izuku's throat felt dry from the intensity of Rikimaru's stare, but he persisted. "I want to learn Jeet Kune Do, and I came here, out of all the academies in the city, because you know what it means to have to fight for something, to sweat and bleed for a drop of respect from the people who'd much rather kick you down and see you fail." Izuku took a deep breath and bowed his head, hoping that he had said something correct in that mess. I've had to fight every day of my life just to stay afloat. I need to learn to channel the drive I feel inside, and I believe you are the only one who can help me. I understand that I'm untrained, but I still beg of you to consider taking me as your student. That's quite the introduction, young man. You've got spunk, I'll give you that, but tell me, Rikamaru said, bringing them closer together and lowering himself to a more level position. Izuku looked up into the man's hard but inquisitive eyes, sniffling a little. What exactly is your drive? Why do you need to learn Jeet-kun do so bad? This isn't a fun fighting style, it's meant to be strong and aggressive. A boy like you shouldn't need that. Aye, Izuku stammered, swallowing heavily in an attempt to relax his tongue. He recalled that day not long ago. The immobile mass of heroes and civilians, the noxious stench of heated sludge, and Kachan's terrified, desperate eyes that made him run mindlessly. Izuku suddenly discovers his voice. I'm going to go to UA and I'm going to become the first quirkless hero. I won't be the strongest, or the fastest, of your students. But if you agree to train me, I can promise you that I will work twice as hard as anyone you have ever taken on before. I'll have to if I want to reach my goal. Izuku put on his most ferocious face an older gentleman to make fun of him. And, of course, he did. As though Izuku's lifelong dream were a joke, which it most likely is, Rikamaru withdrew and burst out laughing. Izuku inhaled deeply and made an effort to regain his composure. He wasn't unfamiliar with such a response. He was shocked when Rikamaru's big hand fell on his head because he had been so preoccupied with trying not to look angry. The older man grinned wryly and squatted down once more. A quirkless hero, huh? And here I thought I'd heard everything. What's your name, son? The hand on his head started to roughly ruffle his hair as he stammered, Midoriya Izuku, does this mean you'll take me on, sir? Rikamaru responded sternly, but not rudely. First of all, that's Shisho to you, getting back up and extending his limbs. Second, I think you're crazy, Midoriya, but I've seen your kind before. I know all too well that you're going to keep searching until you find someone just as crazy as you are to teach you. Might as well make sure you do it safely and smartly. It took Izuku a few moments to comprehend the words of his new master because he was so accustomed to being let down. He got up right away and bowed low out of respect and to conceal the fact that he had begun to cry once more. Thank you, Rikamaru Shisho. I won't let you down, I promise. I'll give it everything I have and then some. Don't thank me yet, boy. You promised me you'd work twice as hard and I'm going to hold you to that end. Believe me, if I think for one instant that you aren't worth my time, you're out. You got that? Izuku gave a firm nod. Alright, I'll expect you here every Monday, Wednesday and Saturday from 1600 to 1900 where I'll make you sweat, bleed and cry and maybe turn you into a real martial artist. Izuku muttered under his breath, hey, I'm also taking Aikido at my school, so I'll just skip on Mondays and Wednesdays and come right here. According to my research, you usually negotiated your fee depending on the student. It's just me and my mom, so we don't have a lot of extra money. I can talk to my mom about what we can afford and we can work something out for my first lesson. He stopped when he noticed Rikamaru Shisho complete his stretches and take off his shirt. As he assumed a casual fighting stance, Rikamaru Shisho asked, has anyone ever told you that you talk too much, kid? With a slightly menacing smile, Shinso said, we can work out all that stuff while you show me what you've got. Do you happen to know what day it is, Midoriya? It's Wednesday, your first lesson begins now. Let your mother know you're going to be late. There are some spare uniforms in the back, find something in your size and change into it. I'm sure your mother doesn't want to clean blood out of your school clothes. After spending hours with Rikamaru Shisho organizing his new training schedule, Izuku arrived home very late that evening. He felt happier than he had in a long time, despite the fact that he was exhausted and in pain, and that he would likely be even more so tomorrow. He was finally on his way. He talked excitedly to his mother during dinner about Rikamaru Shisho and the very fair price the man demanded when his mother put down her bowl with a soft, hesitating clink. With her eyes downcast and her fingers twitching nervously, Mom whispered, Izuku, why are you doing this? With a weak response, Izuku said, self-defense, Mom, you know, we talked about this, remember? The lie was awkward and weighty. Mom scowled and gave him a stern look, but her eyes' obvious concern mitigated the effect. She sighed and rubbed her temple. I'm not stupid, Izuku. I understand Aikido, but this is just street fighting disguised as a martial art. She said. Izuku put down his dinner and reached across the table for her hand, saying, "I'm worried for you. I don't know what you're thinking right now and that scares me. You've been so different since you met that sludge villain and I don't know what to do." Izuku said, "Mom," as she repositioned her hand to take his. He noticed tears welling up in her eyes and said, "You know my dream, the same one I've had my whole life. I've waited and waited for a quirk to come for so long and it's just, not. But it's not your fault, or mine, probably isn't Dad's either. It just is, only now, I've decided that I'm not going to wait for my dream anymore. I'm going to work for it," he said while giving her hand a firm grasp. His mother can't contain her tears this time, and Izuku can't help but start crying too. "Rikamaru Shisho is going to teach me offensive fighting, and I'll learn defense and stamina from the school's Aikido. I'm going to study up and learn the best tools and strategies to counter all kinds of quirks. I'm going to apply to UA in February and I'm going to become the first quirkless hero." Mom softly said, "Baby," as she raised his hand to her face. "I know it's stupid and crazy and impossible but, Mom, I just can't turn this part of me off. I need to try, Mom. I need to or I'll never be happy," Izuku thought to himself. A long time ago, you told me that you were sorry when we found out I was quirkless," he said, conjuring up those painful, old memories. "Well, right now, I don't need you to say you're sorry again or tell me I can't do this. I'm tired of being put down before I even get started. I just need someone to believe in me for once, to say, 'Hey Izuku, you might just be crazy enough to pull this off.'" He dropped his head and quietly murmured himself, "I just want the chance to prove I'm not completely useless." Mom blubbered, "Hey Izuku," from across the table. When he looked up, he saw that she was still cupping his hand to her face, barely holding herself together. "I think you might be insane enough to do this." She blinked back the tears and closed her eyes. He bit his lip and nodded enthusiastically, saying, "You hear me, young man. You have to keep your dear old mother's poor heart in mind." "I will, I promise. I'll work hard and make you proud, Mom," Izuku replied. With a sigh, his mother kissed his hand and then released it. "Oh Izuku, I've always been proud of you. Never forget that. No matter what anyone else tells you, I've always known you were going to be something special. Follow your dreams, honey. I'll support you wherever you go." Izuku eagerly accepted the challenge as his training significantly increased in intensity now that he had a qualified instructor. His mind also needed to be trained, in addition to his body. Izuku had to learn to think his way out of situations because he was never going to be able to bridge the physical gap. Even though he didn't have time to pursue hero battles anymore, he used his numerous news apps to stay informed. Late at night, when he should have been sleeping, he painstakingly examined every hero vs villain battle, searching for weaknesses and determining how he would have fought if he had been present. Izuku worked twice as hard as he had promised Rikamaru Shisho, and he delivered on that promise. It appears that he spent as much time training as he did dry heaving on the dojo floor. Izuku, however, rose faithfully each morning regardless of how sore he was or how heavy his eyelids were from exhaustion. Despite the rigorous and demanding schedule, he gradually started to see improvements in himself. As he traveled farther more quickly, his runs grew longer. He found it easier to perform the once impossible moves until they became second nature. Rikamaru Shisho replaced his hesitancy and awkwardness with strength and hard work. Izuku stopped losing as badly, but he never won any of their matches and probably never would. Until he was as proficient with a bow as he was with his fists, he trained day and night. Even the school-run Aikido program provided him with a foundation upon which to build, allowing him to combine the grace of a traditional martial art with the intensity of Jeet Kune Do. His training had the pleasant side effect of reducing the bullying to almost nothing. Since the sludge incident, Kachan had not really bothered him, and because of Izuku's now clear muscular tone, he was avoided by potential bullies. This development only motivated him to work even harder at his training. In fact, Izuku overreached himself by exceeding Shisho's expectations of him. That day, his master really slammed into him, telling him that working too much would only make him worse off. However, Izuku couldn't bring himself to regret it as he sat on the dojo floor, his muscles shaking from the mere strain of sitting up straight. He only thought about his objectives. Yes, the past 10 months have been difficult, but Izuku is happy with his progress in such a short period of time. Naturally, though, if he failed to reach UA, it would all be for nothing. For the 100th time, Izuku lets out a sigh, turns over in bed, and tries to make himself fall asleep. He needs to be in peak condition for the entrance exam tomorrow. He still needs to get enough sleep, even though it's not like he will be fighting or anything. Izuku rolls over and frowns once more, facing a huge poster of All Might on his wall, which isn't helping his mood at the moment. Perhaps his frustration at not even bothering to apply for heroics is contributing to his insomnia. A part of him, which has been gradually developing over the past 10 months, is yelling that he deserves to compete against all of the other potential hero students. But without a quirk, they probably wouldn't even let him in the door because of the bigger, more useful side counters. He is therefore aiming for the General Education Department, which is still regarded as one of Japan's best and most competitive high school programs. In addition, a number of professional heroes were able to transition from general to heroics. Izuku tells himself that not going all the way is a sign of cowardice. Additionally, he tells himself that he is already being hopeful about his prospects. He ultimately feels queasy and a little sweaty, but he eventually falls into a fitful sleep. He sees heroes in his dreams. A living legend is pacing in his kitchen across town in a modest, unremarkable apartment while Izuku tries and eventually succeeds in falling asleep. Toshinori, better known by his stage name All Might, is still wearing his costume, which dangles awkwardly from his frail and shabby body. He fiddles with the phone on his shoulder, pinching his nose in frustration. Toshinori yawns as he glances at the time and considers whether it would be simpler to stay up and then go to the school. Please, can't we do this at a more reasonable hour? I need to be at UA for the entrance exams first thing in the morning and I'm not exactly as young as I used to be. First of all, I knew you were awake because I saw on the news that you stopped a bus collision not more than 30 minutes ago. Good work on that by the way, drolly says Night Eye. And second, you won't talk to me any time during the day so I figured I'd try the middle of the night, the man adds, his voice tense and worn out. Toshinori uses his bony fingers to rub his face. All Might please, just look at the file I sent you. This young man is perfect, you couldn't ask for a better successor to take your place as the symbol of peace. If the man wasn't such a pain in his side, he would be more worried about his former sidekick's well-being. Toshinori avoids becoming tangled in the phone cord and snorts dismissively. He wished Night Eye had given his cell a call. He would not have answered the phone once he saw who was on the caller ID, though. You make it sound like a job interview, he spits out, feeling resentful, vulnerable, and everything that All Might is not. But he's not almighty at the moment, and it's late. This isn't, Toshinori yells, pausing to take a deep breath, this isn't something I can decide from a file, Night Eye. This is, personal, and important, probably the most important thing I will ever do. Toshinori is morbidly amused that his former sidekick appears more distraught over his impending death than he did. I know, which is why I'm trying to help you. You're sick, All Might, you need to start training a successor now or you might not be able to. Toshinori rolls his eyes and says, I've had him at my agency since the last sports festival and he's everything you could possibly want, he's just like you. He wants to say, like me or like All Might, but he doesn't. He can't vent all of the anger and frustration that have been building inside of him on Night Eye, who is both a friend and a fan. Toshinori is tense and unhappy as he stands in his kitchen, hunched over an old corded phone, feeling more exhausted than he has any right to be. Just look at the file. If you look at it and you still don't like him then I promise I'll let it go. But I will keep searching, the perfect successor isn't just going to drop into your lap. Toshinori doesn't respond, instead making his way back to the wall where the phone is connected before he trips over the cord and breaks his hip or something. If you're interested, I can let you meet him. See the boy up close, as a person and not just a job applicant. You can decide for yourself if he's worthy or not. All Might. Fine, sighs Toshinori. I just don't like how impersonal this feels. If it will get you off my back, I'll look at your file and we'll see if I'm up for meeting him. I was taken from nothing by my master, and now I am able to evaluate and assess a child using data and computations. I just guess I'm nervous as all, tired too. You do realize midnight passed quite some time ago. Night Eye gently responds, of course, I'll let you get your rest. I know how much you need it, with a tone of relief. Let me know what you think of the boy, alright. I have a few other candidates in mind but I really believe this is the one. Before the other man can continue to bother him, Toshinori ends the call and says, yeah, okay. You try and sleep sometime today too, I'll talk to you later. Since he has Night Eye, really, who needs a wife? The phone clicks loudly in the quiet of the apartment as he places it back in its cradle. Holding his costume to keep from tripping, Toshinori trudges to his bedroom while rubbing his eyes once more. As he walks past his desk, he notices the manila folder buried beneath a few pointless papers, lying obligingly off to the side. He grabs it and gives the file a droll glance before he can question himself. Mirio Tagata, Night Eye is correct. He must eventually make a decision because time is running out. Toshinori carries the folder haphazardly under his arm as he enters his bedroom. The following morning, Izuku awakens in a panic, sweating and trembling, convinced that he has missed the UA entrance exam. He doesn't notice it's still dark outside until he's gotten out of bed and is frantically attempting to put on pants. His alarm isn't scheduled to go off for another hour, he realizes after looking at his phone. Izuku decides he might as well perform his usual exercises even though he is exhausted because he knows he is too nervous to go back to sleep. As usual, he finds his balance with the help of his feet thumping on the sidewalk and the satisfying burn in his muscles as he practices his stances. Izuku is twice as exhausted by the time he takes a shower, eats breakfast, and gets ready to leave, but amazingly, his anxiety has subsided to a dull buzz. As he gets ready to go, his mother runs her hand through his hair. "I'll be thinking about you, Izuku, be safe and don't let anyone get you down." Izuku smiles and responds, "It's just a written exam for the general education kids, Mom," despite his inner yell. Before starting his journey to UA, Izuku smiles for the first time as his mother gently says, "There's no one path in life, Izuku. I know you're upset but I think this is the right decision for right now, you'll get there, honey. Don't think of this as a roadblock but as the first step in your journey." His nervousness returned with a vengeance by the time he arrived at the school, threatening to cause him to vomit on the steps of one of Japan's best schools. Instead, Izuku pushes himself to continue walking by putting one foot in front of the other. He nearly misses the heroics exam entrance because he is so preoccupied with avoiding getting sick. If he hadn't, it almost would have been better. With anxious yet proud looks on their faces, Izuku observes the group of students making their way to the hero entrance. They had all likely been told that their eccentricities would get them into UA, which is why his fists were clenched. They had most likely never experienced the same sense of hopeless, desperate desire that Izuku did on a daily basis. Izuku briefly entertains the idea that he might despise them for their self-assurance and eccentricities before he forces himself to stop thinking negatively. That wasn't the mindset of a future hero, or at least not of a child who was going to take one of the most difficult exams in his life. Izuku turns and begins to walk toward his actual exam location after catching a final, yearning glimpse of the hero entrance. Kachan appears to be remarkably composed and focused as he navigates the crowd. Even though his old friend has stopped bullying him since the sludge incident, he still wouldn't be pleased to see Izuku here. Izuku made sure Kachan never saw him by using the stealth techniques he had developed over the previous 12 months. With a sigh of relief, he looks at his watch and realizes it's time to leave. He spins around and bumps into someone. The girl teeters backwards and exclaims, "Oh!" But Izuku reaches out and steadies her before she falls. Izuku blushes and is about to stutter out a few more excuses when his feet lift off the floor. "Oh gosh, I'm so sorry," he replies. He begins to float upward and yells. Before he can get any higher, the girl he nearly knocked over grabs his arm. "Sorry about that, you startled me and I just activated my quirk without thinking," the girl admitted, appearing somewhat agitated herself. When gravity regains its grip on Izuku, she lowers him back to the ground and clasps her hands together. "It's fine," the girl with the brown hair says with a smile. Izuku feels dizzy from her warm smile and rosy red cheeks. "Thanks for not letting me fall. That seems like a bad omen for me to fall on my face right before the exam. You have good reflexes, I'm sure you'll pass for sure." His brain briefly shorted out because of how bright and clear her open expression was. He was speaking to a girl, and her voice was devoid of any hint of derision. She says, I'm so nervous I bet you are too," with a smile. He could only stare at her, his mouth hanging open. As she dashes in the direction of the hero entrance, she waves, "Well, good luck, maybe I'll see you later." He is startled out of his daze by the knowledge that she most likely assumed he was taking the heroics exam as well. It serves as a reminder to Izuku that he must finally take his own test before he makes the foolish decision to try to take the heroics exam without any peculiarities. On the opposite end of the expansive campus, Izuku jogs in the direction of the general education entrance. He keeps thinking about the girl with the brown hair as he goes. He finds himself hoping she makes it because she was nice and had a really cool quirk. He might be able to fight with her someday if he were lucky enough. When he gets to the exam entrance, he slows down. Well, this was his starting line, regardless of what lay ahead. He is reminded that although he sees general education as a kind of stepping stone, it is still a highly sought-after program for students from all backgrounds, and the test turns out to be extremely challenging. Izuku feels unsteady as he leaves the testing facility, questioning whether he even had the strength to overcome this minor challenge. Izuku can almost act as though nothing is wrong while he awaits the results. He had given Yue all of his hopes and dreams. He questions what he would do if he didn't get in during the excruciating days he spends waiting for the results. Izuku lives in constant anxiety and numbness until one day he finds a sealed envelope on the counter when he returns home from training. With trembling fingers, he opens it to discover what he will need for the spring term. Izuku was accepted. He would be attending the general education department at UA. His disappointment is unavoidable, even though this was good news. This might have been his Hero Academia. He might have been opening a letter from the hero course. Rather, he scrubs roughly at his eyes and shakes his head. In any case, he had to live with the decision, even though he will never know if it was the right one. He suppresses all of those negative feelings and puts on his best smile for his mother, who was pacing nervously behind him. Her ecstatic scream as he holds up the acceptance letter nearly makes him forget that he still has a long way to go before achieving his ultimate goal. But he will always strive for it. As he ran through the hallways of his new high school, Izuku was a complete mess. He had just missed his train and had to wait for the later one, according to his mother, who wouldn't stop congratulating him and hugging him this morning. He had hoped for more time to explore the campus, but he wasn't exactly late yet. He had wanted to find the hero students, if he was telling the truth. He slows down as he gets closer to Class 1C, but at least there was time for that later. He faces his classroom with both renewed courage and apprehension. His story starts at this point. Izuku was about to enter when the door screams open, and he is knocked to the ground by another child. Izuku, a little stunned, looks worriedly at the boy who fell on top of him. He had bright red eyes, untidy orange hair, and was about his size, but more significantly, he was pale, unsteady, and appeared to be about to get sick. The boy clambers to his feet and makes his way down the hallway, most likely in the direction of the bathroom. The sound of the child dropping his breakfast on the hallway floor makes Izuku wince. Oh God, I can't do this, I absolutely can't do this. I can't. In other words, poor guy, what a way to start the day. A girl with dark purple hair tied in a tail says, "Oh geez, that doesn't sound good," and she nervously peers out the door. Another tall boy with fluffy brown hair and bright green eyes stands beside her. It takes Izuku an extra second to notice that the girl has pure white sclera beneath her glasses instead of irises as she looks down at him. "Look at you, are you okay?" she asks, reaching out to assist Izuku in standing up. She says cheerfully, "Your mom seems really sweet, but you can't let her make you late every day," after she releases his hand. Izuku merely gives her a blink. Motome says, "Sorry, I'm Moto Miyame, and my quirk is past vision. I can see up to an hour of anyone's past if I touch them," grinning slightly. The red-haired boy has finally stood up and stumbled into the bathroom down the hall. "What's your name?" Izuku stammers, Midoriya Izuku, already feeling a little unbalanced from the altercation, and now he's speaking to a girl. He didn't think his first day of high school would go like this. The brown-haired boy says, "Nice to meet you," in a pleasant but preoccupied tone. He was likely so preoccupied that he was unaware that he had used English. He did appear to have some Western features. Now that Izuku is looking at him, was he mixed? Saying, "My name is Patrick Takamitsu, please call me Patrick, I'll catch up with you guys later. I want to make sure that kid is okay." "Excuse me." Patrick brushes past them and follows the redhead into the bathroom. Motome shrugs and says, "Anyway, welcome to Class 1C, as she moves aside to make room for Izuku. She says, in a way that doesn't feel natural, "We still have a few minutes before homeroom starts. I can introduce you to some people I was talking to earlier." Izuku wasn't the eccentric freak who aspires to be a hero in this situation. He had no connection to his middle school self, he was just another student. "Yeah, sure, that'd be great. Thank you, Motome," she says, guiding him to a small group of people who acknowledge him with a wave and a smile. As his face flushes, he observes with a funny twisting sensation in his stomach that the majority of them were girls. Motome says, "This is Midoriya," to the 4 people huddled around a single desk. Izuku smiles at the group and is happy when they return the smile. He had an unfortunate run-in with that poor kid on his way to the lavatory, but Patrick went to go check up on him. "Midoriya, this is Kiyoshi, Kaneki, Korudo and Taiketsu." Brightly, a little girl with pastel blue hair in a braid says, "Kiyoshi Kokura, class empath. Don't be so worried about people liking you, Midoriya. I just met you and I like you just fine." A tall girl with soft brown deer ears, horns, and tail stands next to Kiyoshi. She pats Kiyoshi's head and sighs affectionately. The girl with the brown eyes says, "Don't mind her," adding, "Coco-chan and I went to middle school together, she's always like that. She just says whatever she's thinking or feeling, even if it happens to be someone else's emotion." She gives Kiyoshi a mock glare before turning back to Izuku grin. "I'm Kaneki Shika, by the way. It's a pleasure to meet you, Midoriya." "I'm Korudo Dan," the lone boy with pale blonde hair in the group proudly declares. "I can control my body's temperature, meaning I can not only survive in any environment but I can heat or chill my body. I may have failed the heroics exam, but I'm going to get transferred and become a great hero someday." The girl with the dark hair says, "And I'm Taiketsu Akane, nice to meet you," as she sits in the chair. A large girl with a round face and wavy black hair that fell over her shoulders and was secured with a red headband asked, "So is your quirk-like endeavors, son? Taiketsu, can you form ice?" "Well," Korudo utters clumsily. She goes on, "What about fire?" Korudo responds sharply, "Not that either," with a frustrated expression. Taiketsu smiles, but her dark red eyes are teasing. "Well, what are you going to do? I think they want heroes who can do more than change their body temperature," she says. For Korudo, "I still have a shot." They start laughing among themselves, but Izuku discovers he couldn't. The Todoroki kid has a natural advantage since his dad is the number 2. "Maybe I can't make ice or flame, but I can still do stuff," the girls say. Izuku interrupts, drawing everyone's attention to himself. "I believe you," he says. The scrutiny makes him flush a little, but he keeps going. Izuku loses himself in his thoughts as he lists all the potential outcomes for a hero with Korudo's abilities. I mean, it is a pretty handy quirk from the sounds of it. Depending on how quickly you could regulate your temperature and what adverse effects it had on your body, it could be very versatile. You could perform rescue operations to regions where other people wouldn't survive. You could warm up or cool down sick patients. I'm sure you could even come up with combat techniques that augment your quirk if you really worked at it." Another boy across the room, his hair in a tall pompadour, says, "Hey, look out everyone, we've got a nerd in here." He then lets out a loud, nasal laugh. Due to years of conditioning, Izuku automatically closes his mouth. He somewhat despises himself because of how simple it is to revert to old, unhealthy behaviors. Motome gives the pompadour boy an empty-eyed glare that makes the other boy turn away in discomfort. "Hey, don't listen to him, Midoriya," Motome says. With a smile that calms Izuku, Taiketsu says, "Yeah, that was amazing, Midoriya. Are you interested in heroics too?" She turns to Korudo, and he gives a shy nod. She says a little tremblingly, "I apologize if I offended you, I was just kidding. Besides, I really don't have room to talk. I was interested in being a hero for a long time, but I kind of gave that up." Korudo sniffs, looking unhappy but refusing to acknowledge it. "Well, I suppose you do have a point that I need to improve both my quirk and physical abilities if I want to transfer." Korudo turns to face him, and Izuku anticipates that Korudo will inquire about his peculiarity. Fortunately, the biracial boy, Patrick, and the sick boy were revealed when the classroom door opened, sparing Izuku from that revelation. One of the scariest men Izuku has ever seen appears behind them. The rest of the class seems to have agreed because they all freeze when the tall, dark-skinned man enters the room. In addition to a few facial scars, Izuku's left hand ended at the wrist, and 3 of his right fingers were partially amputated. Was he a hero, or a Yakuza boss of some sort? The entire class is seated and silent in a matter of seconds after Sensei says, "Good morning class, I am your homeroom teacher Chiora Hiro. Please take your seats," in a quiet yet firm voice. "I will not waste your time or mine with meaningless pleasantries. Here is what you need to know. You will be on time every day for homeroom. You will be quiet unless I call on you, and you will respect me and your classmates at all times. If you can follow these rules, then we will have a good working relationship." He stops and allows the weight of his words to take hold before continuing. "Now opening ceremonies are about to start. we will walk there single file and, once that has concluded, you will change into your gym uniforms and we will conduct physical exams. I understand that your middle schools prevented you from using your quirks during these tests. Well, this is UA and, even though you're in general education, we still expect you to be able to manage your abilities. So you will be allowed to use your quirks within reason. A brief roar enters the air and is quickly cut off. Izuku swallows uneasily. Well, using quirks was going to be difficult. Izuku spends the majority of the opening ceremonies dozing off as he worries about the impending physical examination because not even UA can make them engaging. He had hoped for a little more time before his new classmates discovered how odd he was. The brief time spent speaking with everyone this morning had been really pleasant, but it probably wouldn't be as horrible as it had been in middle school. Izuku assumes that ending it was preferable to continuing to live a lie. He flinches, recalling that he had mentioned that he was considering applying to the heroics department. Great, they'll believe he was a fool and worthless. The shocking news that All Might, the #1 hero and everyone's favorite, would be teaching at UA this year momentarily overshadows his gloomy thoughts. Izuku is so excited that he can hardly contain it. Since UA was the top hero school in the nation, he had applied, but now his idol would also be attending. Izuku might see him in the hallways and hear that loud, booming voice somewhere besides his television, even though he was most likely only going to instruct the hero students. The assembly ended awkwardly when it became apparent that Hero Class 1A simply wasn't going to show up, despite that shocking announcement. The teachers appear irritated but not particularly shocked, though he is unsure of what transpired there. Kachan is not visible to Izuku. Izuku assumes his old friend must be with the absent 1A since he spent the final week of middle school announcing his acceptance into UA's heroics department. Before long, the entire class is standing on one of UA's numerous fields, all of them wearing their gym attire. They are arranged in class order, and Shiora-sensei paces placidly in front of them. Izuku feels as though his teacher pauses a little longer in front of him, as if sensing his weakness, before continuing. Perhaps this was just his nerves. All right, we will be performing a variety of physical exercises today. This is just like you did in middle school, but you will be allowed to use your quirks so long as you control them and use them only for the tests. At UA, we believe in using all of our skills to reach our full potential. Is this clear? They all say, "Yes, sensei," and Shiora-sensei nods in agreement. He resumes pacing while clutching his left stump behind his back with his mangled right hand. He says, "I suppose I should tell you a little about myself," in a calm, steely voice that begs for attention. That's why Izuku was given a closer look. My quirk is identification, which means I can identify the quirk of anyone I look at and use that to compile basic strengths and weaknesses. Sensei, I'm still searching for it too, Izuku muses sardonically. I joined the military right out of high school, became involved in special operations all across Japan and occasionally overseas. This, Sensei continues with his hands raised, happened nearly 15 years ago during a mission. It cut my military career short, but I found work within hero support. I have personally worked with many professionals heroes, including most of the ones on this campus, and yes, All Might himself. While I am not a hero, no one understands them better than me. So why am I teaching general education? He stops and looks at them with his pale eyes that are golden. Because I understand that the heroics entrance exam is a load of bullcrap. Any idiot can smash a robot while talented students fall through the cracks. The general education teachers serve as a checkpoint. I'm sure all of you at some point have dreamed of being a hero, but either due to failing the heroics exam or lack of confidence, you ended up here. One of my jobs is to evaluate you, see if any of you are capable of transferring. Shiora-sensei stops and gives them a final look of, "So put your all into these exercises, your futures just might depend on it." He lets them digest his remarks. Smile. You have 5 minutes to warm up and then we begin. By the time his instructor is done, Izuku is practically trembling, and for good reason. The man had given them a direct look and declared that he would decide whether or not they were worthy of being transferred. Although it was well known that students could transfer to the heroics department, this was not a frequent occurrence. Izuku questions whether he's examining one of the causes. "Oh man, that was intense," Taketsu remarks as she approaches him with a warm but apprehensive smile. Izuku was about to ask her what she meant when he noticed that he had inadvertently initiated his typical warm-up routine. "Wanna stretch together? Exercises aren't exactly my strong suit and you look like you know what you're doing." Observing the other students, Izuku finds that the majority were clumsily attempting to figure out how to work their bodies, and some weren't even making an effort. His life has become so centered around strength training and martial arts that he failed to consider the fact that most people probably lack the same level of discipline. Yeah, sure, I'll show you what I do, Izuku replies as he continues to lead Taiketsu through some of his exercises. She was easy to talk to, and as he explains the goals of each stretch, the familiarity of his exercises immediately made him feel comfortable. Taiketsu sighs as she tries to imitate his toe touch but stops just past her knees. You really are on top of this, she exclaims. What kind of quirk do you have to keep you in such good shape? Izuku murmurs, actually I'm quirkless, hoping she didn't hear him. But he can tell she had because of the wide-eyed expression in her eyes. He says, I hope that's okay, with shyness. She murmurs, yeah, no, of course it's okay, as though Izuku were a legendary being she had never seen but had only heard about. Taiketsu nods her head, sorry, it's just a bit unexpected is all. You don't see many quirkless people these days. You said in homeroom you wanted to transfer to heroics, right? Yeah, Izuku acknowledges, winced in embarrassment. When she smiles, her teeth are sharpened. Hey, I think that's great, she says. I can't wait to see what you can do. As Chiura-sensei declares, alright, if you're not ready now, you'll never be. The majority of the class is startled out of their little chats. We'll start with the 50-meter dash. First 3 in the class, come up and state your name, quirk and intention for study. You will perform the test and then the next group of 3 will do the same, is that clear? They parrot back, yes, sensei, as the first 3 started to assemble. At that moment, everyone is stopped in their tracks as an explosion tears through the atmosphere. Chiura-sensei gives them a scowl. As the first 3 students lined up, Izuku was attempting to relax his tense muscles from the loud, well-known sound. We're not going to stop and gape every time one of the hero kids uses their quirks, now hurry into line. Kachan must have been in one of the aft fields at the other end of the school, based on the strength. He was merely performing physical examinations, just like Izuku, so there was nothing unusual or cause for concern. However, it's not as simple as it seems. As the first students form a line and introduce themselves, he suppresses the remainder of his fear. When Izuku has the opportunity to watch his classmates, his nervousness soon goes away. He learns a few things from it. One is that Izuku spends so much time reading about heroes that he occasionally forgets that not all of their quirks are actually useful or appropriate for combat, like the boy who kept tripping over his unnaturally growing hair. Another was that most of his classmates lacked the strength and endurance necessary for these tests in terms of physical training. Izuku was obviously more suited for this type of exercise than the majority of the other students, even though he was quirkless. Next, it was his turn now, and he, Kiyoshi, and Korudo took the stage. He hears them repeat their peculiarities. Kiyoshi the empath aspired to be a teacher, while Korudo with thermoregulation was set on heroics. After saying, my name is Midoriya Izuku and I also would like to go into heroics. He pauses and looks for Taiketsu, the only person he vaguely recognizes. And I don't have a quirk. That's over with, so let's talk about the consequences. She gives him a worried smile and 2 thumbs up. The crowd lets out a loud laugh. The kid with the pompadour was stooped over laughing. While some of the other children laugh nervously with him, the majority glare or shift uneasily, likely too embarrassed to publicly make fun of Izuku. What kind of idiot thinks he can get into the heroics without a quirk? That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Komodo, Chiura-sensei yells, abruptly cutting off Komodo's laughter. Sensei moves forward and confronts the boy, who is standing up straight and wearing a startled expression. He leans in closer until he is almost nose to nose with Komodo. I gave you 3 rules this morning. Be in homeroom on time, be quiet while I speak, and to respect me and your classmates at all times. Komodo quickly shakes his head and says, if you disrespect your classmates, you disrespect me. Now tell me boy, is that something you want to do? Chiura-sensei looks at him for a moment more before turning to speak to the class as a whole. Every student here has earned their place here until they haven't. Likewise, every student has the potential to go beyond and I'm going to do my best to ensure each and every one of you gets there. Now, may we continue Komodo or do you have anything else to add? Whispering, no, sensei, Komodo tries to blend in with his uniform. Sensei says, I'm getting old boy, speak up, with a grin so big it makes Izuku think of Rikimaru Shisho. Komodo exclaims, no, sensei. Much louder, his face contorted in shame and terror. Shiora-sensei returns to their group with a much more composed expression, seemingly content for the time being. Sensei resets his stopwatch and says, "Okay, if you three are done, then get on over to start line. I'll let you know when to go." Izuku is too preoccupied to look away from his teacher. His middle and elementary school teachers had never bothered to stop any of the bullying Izuku had experienced as a child, which had been far worse than what Komodo had claimed. He was unaware that teachers could do that. He is unable to recall an instance in which someone other than his mother defended him after realizing he was eccentric. Shiora-sensei looks at him. "Is there a problem, Midoriya?" Izuku yells, "And no, sensei," and rushes to the starting line, where Kyoshi and Korudo are already lining up. Izuku feels as though a burden has been removed from his shoulders now that the worst is behind him. Izuku is composed, while Korudo seems arrogant and overconfident. Kyoshi wishes them both well. A 50-meter dash would not matter to him because he runs almost 8 kilometers every day. Go. Izuku took off like a torch. Even though Kyoshi and Korudo wheezed, Izuku felt like he could run indefinitely, but it was over all too quickly. Sensei nods at him in acknowledgement. 7.2 seconds, that's a full second better than the rest of you so far. Good work, Midoriya, I expect to see that same kind of performance in the rest of your tests. Next group line up. Let's see if your quirks can stand up against training and discipline. Izuku breathes in and backs up into position. When he arrives, classmates congratulate him and inquire about his options. The attention was overwhelming, and Izuku just nodded at the people whispering to him, not believing that he wouldn't burst into tears if he spoke. Though it was light years better than where he had been, it wasn't heroic. As Taiketsu, Patrick, and another boy advance as the final group, Izuku smiles encouragingly at her. With a flourish, Patrick's skin starts to glow brightly. "Hey, I'm Patrick Takamitsu. Please call me Patrick. I'm originally from the good old US of America, but my dad lives here, so now I do too," he says. He literally beams, making some of the other students cover their eyes. "My quirk is glow and, like many of my dear friends, I'm also aspiring for heroics," he says. Although it wasn't the most fascinating quirk, there were undoubtedly uses for it given the right circumstances. The final child enters the room with a weary but determined expression on his face. "And I'm Taiketsu Akane. My quirk is Bloodspell, which means I can manipulate my own blood, and Taiketsu says after pausing to think about herself, "I haven't decided what I'm doing yet. My name's Shinso Hitoshi," he murmurs. "Not trying, but going to be a hero. My quirk is Brainwash and I'm going to be a hero." Izuku wishes he had that level of assurance, but it made sense given his peculiarity. Shinso's fists clenched by his side, but Izuku was unable to hear the hushed whispers behind him. After completing all of the introductions, the remaining exercises seemed to go by swiftly. As they finished more and more trials, classmates became more comfortable talking to one another and sharing information about their personal histories and peculiarities. Izuku used to be awful at these things in middle school, always finishing close to the end even though there were no peculiarities involved. He had never been able to compare himself to his peers because he had only recently begun training with Rikamaru Shisho. Izuku barely felt fatigued after finishing the remaining tasks for the remainder of the morning. This was nothing in comparison to what he typically endured. While the results are being compiled, they are given a few minutes to relax. Izuku smiles at Taiketsu, who is lying on the grass, panting and red-faced. When she notices his smile, she kicks him half-heartedly. Kyoshi was leaning against Kanaki's back, Motome had taken out a book from off to the side, and Kordo was chatting with Patrick. Everything appears to be going well for once. Shiora-sensei gives the order, "Okay, line up. We're going to go over the results and then head back inside." The outcomes were, to put it mildly, astounding. Since the majority of his classmates lacked oddities that improved their physical prowess and it appears that the majority have not received any kind of training, Izuku placed first or very nearly first in almost every activity. In a way, it's ironic that Izuku received the second highest grade in the class despite being the only student without a unique skill. Shiora-sensei says, "Let this be a lesson to you all," following the announcement of the final scores. Strength is not defined by your quirk, but by the discipline of your mind, body and soul. We have a couple of students who are actively pursuing the hero track. For those of you who are serious about that, I suggest you work on your performance and attitude. High school passes quickly, go beyond or go home. You have lunch for 1 hour and then regular classes will begin promptly at 1300, dismissed. That was amazing, Midoriya, Taiketsu exclaims as she approaches him, her face beaming with admiration. He stutters an awkward, "Thank you," as he blushes from head to toe at how adorable she is. Pointing to herself, she asks, "Would you be willing to train me?" As some of the others fall in line with them, she rambles, "I need to lose some of these hips, not to mention everywhere else too." "What kind of training have you had?" Izuku rambles, feeling more at ease in his element. "Oh, I've primarily trained with Jeet Kune Do with my master, but I worked with Aikido in middle school and have incorporated that into my style as well. I've wanted to be a hero since I was a kid. I know I'm at a huge disadvantage without a quirk, so I'm working on training my mind and body instead. Just because Yue hasn't graduated a quirkless hero doesn't mean it's impossible." "That's incredible," exclaims Taiketsu. When Korudo responds, "That's insane," the small group turns to face him, but he crosses his arms and frowns. He sighs, strokes his short hair, and smiles a little. "What, we were all thinking it," he says. "Still gotta admit you beat me fair and square in physical tests. Even Taiketsu beat me a couple of times and she's got 15 kilograms on me." Taiketsu strikes him in the arm. Izuku is moved by the friendly camaraderie and acceptance of his ambition despite how unrealistic it may seem. "My point being, it's insane, but sensei is right. You can't write someone off before they get started and you've got a hell of a start. I'd be interested in working with you too, if you don't mind. I've got this amazing quirk, but it doesn't mean much if I can't do anything with it." Patrick leans down to put his arms around the shoulders of Korudo and Izuku and exclaims, "Yeah, me too. We could make it a group thing." With a slightly glowing face, he exclaims, "We can be like a secret club. We can train together and get t-shirts and everything." Korudo hums, "Please don't touch me, Takamitsu," as he escapes Patrick's grasp. "Midoriya, those things you were saying about my quirk in homeroom, can you read those back at me? I think you have some good ideas that I can work with." "Of course, I'd be willing to help you with anything you needed in return." Picking up her pace, Taiketsu says, "Come on, we can talk more over lunch, let's go before the hero kids take all the good stuff. All this exercise has made me hungry." Izuku had never felt more whole in his life as the four of them joked and laughed all the way to the cafeteria. The general education department was also excellent, if only as a stepping stone to becoming a hero. Even after school ended, Izuku continued to prowl the hallways. He had casually mentioned his love for All Might to his new acquaintances, but he somehow prevented them from realizing how compulsive he was. Before unleashing that level of nerdiness on them, he should have made sure they liked him a bit more. His training schedule has prevented him from going hero chasing, but it was simple to revert to his old routine. Izuku was determined to meet the number one, but he was finding it more difficult than he had anticipated. According to rumors, All Might was only seen by hero students today, and even then, only during his scheduled class. Unbelievably, given his size and notoriety, he was not spotted in the cafeteria, the hallways, or anywhere else on campus. Izuku has most likely searched the entire school twice in an attempt to locate his hero. All Might was both incredibly close and incredibly distant. As he was leaving campus today, he believed he had heard All Might's characteristic booming voice close to the teacher's lounge. Even though Izuku was right there, all he could find was a slender, blonde man in an oversized suit who had appeared equally shocked when Izuku almost bumped into him around a corner. Izuku had ducked away after apologizing profusely out of embarrassment, only to discover that he had most likely simply missed his hero. But he was nothing if not committed, so he kept walking around the school in the hopes that the man would somehow just show up. Izuku, however, decides to pack it in for the day after receiving a ping from his Hero Alert app alerting him to the sighting of All Might in Osaka. He knows his mother won't be pleased that he arrived late for his first day of school, and it was almost dark outside. Izuku hears the door at the end of the hallway open, so he turns around and starts to sag toward the exit. A wild mane of purple hair can be seen in the distance when he looks up. Shinso is another student in his class who wants to transfer into heroics and has a brainwashing quirk. Even though they have a lot in common, the other boy makes him uncomfortable for some reason. Izuku raises his hand clumsily in a half wave. He tries not to sound too strange when he says, "Gee, good afternoon, Shinso," but he assumes that went out the window when he was discovered sneaking around the school after hours. Now that I think about it, the other boy's continued presence here seems a little strange, especially given his gym attire. Shinso appears to consider turning around before choosing to continue walking. He marches swiftly past Izuku, keeping his head down. Izuku turns to watch the other boys back as he rushes past with his hands buried deep in his gym pockets, saying only, "Look, just stay out of my way, okay?" After a clumsy mutter, "Have a good evening," Shinso makes her way to the door and exits the wing. Uncertain about the situation or his enigmatic classmate, Izuku says to the empty hallway, "Yeah, you too." It was the first time in a long time that Izuku was truly looking forward to school. He feels energized already after just 2 days. Perhaps it was because he liked some of the people there, and they seemed to like him back. Since his diagnosis, he had essentially had no friends, but now it seemed as though none of that had ever occurred. Pretending that he never ate his lunches by himself in an empty classroom was more pleasant and simpler. As usual, Izuku had his mother, but he also had his homeroom teacher, who was a little frightening, his grumpy but encouraging master, and perhaps some friends. When Izuku arrived at homeroom and discovered a note on his desk, he believed that nothing could bring him down. The message is straightforward, neatly written on a note card, and securely taped to prevent it from being knocked off. In a nutshell, the quirkless don't belong here. Izuku stuffed it into his bag when he ought to have simply crumpled it up and thrown it away. He can't look his friends in the eyes when they enter because of the burning shame in his throat. He clenches and unclenches his fists, trying to stop feeling so small, and his palms perspire. Kiyoshi says, "Izu-kun, is something the matter? Your emotions have been down in the dumps this morning," as he interrupts a conversation once more. Izuku shakes his head. They had nothing to do with this, and homeroom would be starting any moment. Not that he wasn't accustomed to this type of situation. Regretfully, he is not given the option. Shiora-sensei arrives and starts getting ready for homeroom. Patrick unintentionally knocks over Izuku's bag as he leans over to say one last thing to him before class starts. Naturally, one of the items that fell out was the partially crumpled note. Just before Izuku can stop him, Korudo begins to pick up the spilled items. As he reads the message, the other boy's eyes get darker. He raises his hand in the air. "Korudo, just drop it," Izuku says sternly as he pushes the note away and repacks his belongings in his bag. It appears that Korudo was mistaken when he said, "It's not that big of a deal honestly. It's nothing I haven't seen before." Korudo now appears even more irate. Korudo yells, "Shiora-sensei, I'd like to report harassment," loud enough to get all eyes on him. "Oh?" Sensei asks quietly as he moves past his desk and approaches Korudo. "Midoriya was given an offensive note," Izuku says, shrinking into his seat and wanting to die now. "I can only speak for myself, but I did not come to the UA to watch people be bullied for things beyond their control." Shiora-sensei fixes him with his menacing stare and asks, "Is this true, Midoriya?" Really? It's not that important. I don't." Izuku swallows, stressed by the class's disapproving gaze. "That's not what I asked, Midoriya." "Yes, it's true," Izuku murmurs softly, "but it's not. I discovered it on my desk this morning." If not for the low growl, Sensei's voice would almost be gentle as she asks, "May I see the note?" Izuku was certain that the word "may" was used on purpose. Although Sensei wouldn't make him do it, hiding it now seemed like a bigger problem. After taking it out of his bag, Izuku places it in his teacher's mutilated hand. After giving it a quick glance, Sensei frowns and stalks back to the front. The note was placed in the trash can next to his desk. "I believe I made it clear yesterday that I would not tolerate this sort of behavior. If there's anyone who doesn't belong here is the person who wrote that note." His gaze was capable of melting steel. "This had better be the last incident I hear of. If not, we have plenty of quirks in this school who can locate the perpetrator and have them removed from this school entirely." Stillness. "If there's nothing more, I'll begin homeroom." Korudo gives Izuku the thumbs up and appears proud of himself, but he is unable to look at his friend at the moment. Although he is somewhat moved that Korudo thought the matter was important to address, he is also incensed at seeing something so foolish brought up in public. Izuku makes a sincere effort to move on, but Korudo's irritation at Izuku's lack of appreciation only keeps him sulking in silence during morning classes. Korudo says, "I don't see what you're so mad about," while they are eating lunch, in an attempt to get Izuku to at least glance at him. To be honest, Izuku threatened to choke him if he didn't stop right away. "In fact, I can't see why you didn't report the incident yourself. You don't deserve that, and the scum wrote that doesn't deserve to get away with it." Taketsu growls from the other side of the table, "Korudo, just let it go. Patrick simply sits there, stuffing his mouth with food, saying, "It was Midoriya's decision to keep it quiet and you totally blew past that even with the best intentions at heart." Occasionally, he stops as though he wants to say something, but then changes his mind and covers his words with more rice. It's likely that Motome and Kiyoshi were eating at a different table because they could sense Izuku's rotten mood. It's debatable whether it was to give him some room or to keep as far away from the impending explosion as possible. Heroes don't just let things go Taikatsu, and they don't take this kind of crap either, Korudo says. We could have worked this. Motome could have used her past vision to have found who planted the note, or I'm sure Sensei could have gotten the jerk to crack with a little more pressure. I don't even want them expelled, I just want them to know that we don't accept this kind of thing at UA. We shouldn't have to deal with this sort of thing. His fist hits the table and Izuku has no memory of doing it. Izuku says harshly, trying to keep his voice low enough that no one in the cafeteria can hear him. There isn't any we here, Korudo, this is about me. These kinds of things have always been about me ever since my quirk failed to appear. Now I'm so sorry someone writing me a mean note offends your sense of justice, but, for me, it's just reality. In an attempt to eat away at his emotions, Izuku huffs before returning to his meal. I don't need you to defend me, and I'm not some poor, pitiful quirkless person who needs every problem solved by you. There are some things I want to handle on my own and in my own way. If you can't deal with that, then I don't think we can be friends. Izuku didn't really want to break up with him, but he also couldn't tolerate someone who didn't respect him. Kachan had taught him that mean friends were the worst kind of friends. Korudo pouts. Yeah, okay, sorry. I was just trying to help, and the table falls into awkward silence. A quiet voice from the table across from theirs says, I don't know if it matters to you, but I heard it was that Shinso kid. When Izuku looked up, he saw Mifune, the anxious orange-haired child who, if Izuku recalled correctly, was a very weak psychic. Mifune leans forward after taking a worried look around. Mifune shrugs uneasily and lifts his glasses. He hasn't spoken to anyone since class started, plus you know he's pretty suspicious with his quirk and all, he says. Izuku looks at Patrick and Taikatsu in confusion as Korudo turns to question a now completely terrified Mifune. I just thought you should know, in case he decides to do something again. Shinso is the kid with purple hair, the one with the brainwashing quirk, right? Whispers Taikatsu. Yeah, Patrick murmurs as he finishes his meal. He said he was going for heroics during the introductions. I tried to talk with him yesterday, to see if he was interested in hanging out with us, but he kind of brushed me off. I don't want to bad talk about someone I don't know, but he does come across as a bit rude and creepy to boot. Izuku murmurs, that's not nice to say, as he jerks his neck upward to look at his classmate. Izuku located him close to the exit at the far end of the cafeteria. Although Shinso was seated at a table with a few other students, it was obvious that he wasn't really there because he was eating his food in silence. Izuku ducks his head and Shinso looks around suspiciously, as if he senses someone is watching him. Look, please, can we just drop this? I didn't want to make this a big deal in the first place, and I especially don't want to blame some kid who might not have even done anything. With a bright smile on his face, Korudo says, there's only one way to find out, adding, I say we. A low, menacing voice says, I think you've said enough, Korudo, interrupting. Korudo twists his mouth as if he's just tasted something sour, then sits back down. Maybe this time you should ask Midoriya what he wants to do, seeing as he's the one involved in all this. Izuku's mouth quirked into a half smile. Right, sorry, I'm just so mad someone would treat you this way, and I want to make sure it doesn't happen again, she said. Even though Korudo was a hothead and somewhat naive, Izuku couldn't really be angry with him because his heart was in the right place. Let's just let it lie for now. Shiora-sensei probably scared off whoever did it, so it's probably over. Korudo nods but appears unhappy about it, but how about I promise to tell you guys if anything happens again. We'll talk, quietly, to sensei and work something out, alright? Korudo smiles and most of the tension leaves the air as he says, yeah, that sounds good. He grabs Izuku's soda can and wills his temperature to drop. Here, let me cool down your soda for you, to make up for blowing this whole thing up. Taikatsu says, I think Midoriya wants to finish that soda before last period ends, flashing her sharpened teeth in a cheeky smile. Patrick spits out his rice and slaps the table, laughing. There's not enough time left in lunch to wait on your slow-moving quirk. I'm sure you could find Endeavor's boy and ask him to do it lickety-split. Even though Korudo's face is getting hot with rage and Izuku's soda is practically gone, Patrick hoots, and Taketsu gets off a good one yet again. Way to go, girl, remind me not to get on your bad side. However, his friendships are still intact, which is more significant anyhow. Being able to keep an eye on his homeroom students' gym class is something Chiura Hiro enjoys. He felt he could see his students for who they truly were for the first time. There's nothing like a good old-fashioned spar to bring out the best in people. As he observes the pupils, Hiro is not the first to notice that every new class seems to fit into the same categories. For instance, there are small groups that were merely gossiping while feigning a fight. They were generally decent kids, self-assured, and a little fluttery, but they didn't see the point of the activity and didn't try. They would barely pass their classes and led decent, but ultimately typical, lives. They are at least superior to those who were silently watching from the sidelines and weren't even attempting to participate. Although they were clearly intelligent and from wealthy families, they were haughty and contemptuous. Without gaining any human understanding, they would succeed at UA and go on to have amazing careers. The majority of students are reluctantly participating in the sessions because they are self-conscious and fear hurting others, but they are still making an effort. They were the ones who would put in a lot of effort to achieve their own objectives and had aspirations beyond heroes and eccentricities. They would succeed, graduate UA, and go on to live happy, contented lives. Then there are the few students who were acting more aggressively during the training than was necessary. They were the misfits, the ones whose negative attitudes prevented them from reaching their full potential. Hiro would be monitoring them in the hopes that discipline and direction would help them get their act together. Hiro evaluates the final group with curiosity. The aspiring hero students would inexorably fall together each year. Takamitsu groans loudly as he hits the ground first. Although he was a boisterous and gregarious boy, his ideals of heroism were, at best, unrealistic and probably a result of his American upbringing. By the end of the semester, the boy would probably give up on his goals. Korudo grunts in frustration and falls next. Another boy from a wealthy family who had likely been assured that his eccentricity and his family's support would carry him through to the end, only to discover that he lacked the motivation and fortitude to succeed as he had in middle school. He was a decent child who simply needed to gain a better understanding of how the world operated. Taketsu falters, but she quickly regains her balance. Hiro still doesn't fully understand her intentions. She had the intelligence and tenacity to see her through, but as far as he could tell, she lacked the direction, making her both strong and delicate. However, Midoriya has piqued his interest the most out of all the students in his class because he defies classification. He doesn't look at all like the boy who this morning seemed to want to melt into his seat. The young man in front of him is powerful, his toned muscles show through his gym attire as he parries, dodges, and counters every blow that is directed at him. Though he's not sure he's ever seen any desire for heroism as strong as Midoriya Izuku's, Hiro has seen a lot of boys and girls pass through his class with similar dreams. His application is more challenging because of the boy's eccentricity, but after seeing him now, Hiro wouldn't say it's impossible just yet. Hiro yells, "Midoriya," to get everyone's attention. As though his name reminded him that he should be shy and submissive, the boy in question winces and breaks his stance. Hiro would do anything to speak with the boy's former instructors, who had obviously instilled a sense of inadequacy in him. "Please demonstrate that last move again for the class." That was a very simple but effective takedown, one that would be useful in a variety of situations. Returning to his feet, Korudo sighs and throws another punch. As before, Midoriya sidesteps the first blow and leaps forward to seize Korudo's forearm before executing a graceful shoulder toss while bracing his other arm. Korudo could only strike the mat hard, even though he knew what to expect. But before Korudo could get off the ground, Midoriya rushed forward to apologize and assist his friend in standing up. Strong, intelligent, and incredibly kind, he would be closely monitoring Midoriya's development. Hiro nods toward the boy and says, "Good work, your martial arts master should be proud." Midoriya flushes but is stopped before he can say anything. Denials. "Did you all see what he did?" Most people jump away to get out of range when they dodge a punch, but Midoriya went towards his attacker. He made his defense his offense and using it to neutralize his opponent. Fuyuko jogs over to greet the small group, with the majority of the other students following closely behind. "Geez, that was incredible, where'd you learn to do that?" he asks. Smiling shyly, Midoriya murmurs, oh well, I've been training in martial arts for the last year, my master is pretty tough so I had to learn pretty quickly." Takamitsu gives his friend an enthusiastic clap on the back and remarks, "No need to be modest, Midoriya has some kick-ass judo moves over here," almost knocking him down. The green-haired boy corrects, "Actually it's Jeet Kune Do with some Aikido mixed in," but it was difficult to hear over the crowd of students that now surrounded him. It's almost time to dismiss the students for the day, so Hiro checks the clock. Hiro could, and probably ought to, make everyone return to their partners, but he believes Midoriya would benefit from some attention. Given the chaos during homeroom, Midoriya's desire to be a hero was lacking only in confidence, despite his skill and intelligence. Several of the students back up and shake their heads as Hiro says, "All right, let's have a little challenge. You all have nice quirks. Who wants to take on Midoriya one-on-one? He's the only one here with actual training experience despite his lack of a quirk." He smiles. "Your apprehension is understandable in the face of an experienced fighter, that sort of discipline should be respected." Shinso says, "I'll go," and moves forward as Hiro had anticipated. Hiro was already aware that Shinso and Midoriya were the most ambitious and probably the most suitable for heroics. If Midoriya could let go of her fears and Shinso could overcome his long-standing resentment, they could accomplish great things together. They could close that gap with a friendly spar. With trepidation, Midoriya says, "I," then settles more assuredly into his position. "All right, I'm ready when you are." Shinso yells, "You better be," and charges forward violently. It was an ill-planned attack brought on by repressed rage. Midoriya was able to pop up behind his opponent and duck under his wild swing with ease. He lightly taps Shinso in the back, not so much to cause harm as to show how weak the other boy's defenses are. "Try being more purposeful with your attack," says Midoriya in a friendly manner. "Also never let your opponent see your back, always keep your weak points guarded." Shinso grits his teeth and says, "I don't need advice from you," as he charges forward once more. His movements are more accurate this time, but once more, Midoriya sidesteps the attack and turns Shinso's momentum against him, sending the boy crashing to the ground. Shinso pushes himself back up and hisses. While some of the students applaud, Hiro scowls at Shinso's somber expression. This wasn't meant to be a public humiliation, but rather a friendly spar. "You're fighting emotionally," Midoriya says gently, "but you have natural strength and strong drive." Hiro recognizes the sentiment, but he believes that someone as arrogant and insecure as Shinso would not value the well-meaning remark. "Try coming at me again, I promise I won't move this time." Shinso says, "Stop acting like you're better than me," and comes forward, his fist up. With a determined frown, Midoriya delivers on his promise and doesn't back down. Rather, the boy with the green hair effortlessly catches the fist and twists Shinso's arm until he collapses to one knee in agony. "Don't leave yourself so open, your punches should be quick, unannounced and then held back at your core to avoid them being used against you," Midoriya says with a firm hand. Midoriya has a firm hold on Shinso despite his heroic efforts to break free. This spar will get worse before it gets better, but there are still a few minutes left in class. Chirura-sensei says, "Okay boys, that's enough, good work to both of you," and then he moves forward. Izuku swiftly releases Shinso, more than happy to have the chance to break up the fight. He didn't want to appear weak, but he also didn't want to hurt the other boy. Because he was eccentric, he couldn't let people think they could walk all over him if he wanted to succeed at UA. "You are dismissed for the day. I saw some good effort out there today, but I expect more in the future. Have a good afternoon, I will see you in the morning." The group starts to shuffle toward the exit when one of his classmates exclaims, "Awesome job Midoriya." Izuku feels a little better when he sees a few people wave to him as they go by. It appears that not everyone is against him. Still kneeling, Shinso is extending the twisted arm of Izuku. Izuku extends his hand to assist him in standing. "Even if you left a negative note on my desk," Izuku thinks bitterly, "I'm sorry if I hurt you, I just wanted people to know that I'm serious in my intentions to transfer over to heroics." Izuku pauses, "I know you're hoping to transfer too. I think we got off to a bad start, but I'd like to try and be friends." However, he had no evidence that Shinso had done so, and heroes were meant to be stronger than their feelings. Shinso angrily says, "Don't be stupid," ignoring Izuku's hand that is extended for him to stand up by himself. "It's not stew." Izuku froze, his muscles tensing up, and his thoughts becoming cloudy. He tries to move and do anything, but he is unable to even move his fingers. Shinso says, "Listen here, approaching. Just because you have the advantage right now with your martial arts doesn't mean that you're better qualified to be a hero than me. I've waited a long time for this opportunity and I'm not going to let anyone stand in my way. I'm not looking for friends. If you're really serious about transferring, then that makes us rivals. You'd do well to remember that. Shinso takes a few steps back as Kurudo stomps over and exclaims, "Hey! What's going on over here?" Patrick waves a hand in front of Izuku's face, but he is unable to move, and Izuku remains in his uncomfortable position. "You think it's funny to use your power on some quirkless kid? I'm sure Sensei would love to hear about your unauthorized quirk use." Kurudo is glaring back at Shinso with equal ferocity for the obvious threat. The fact that Kurudo was so short that he had to stand on his toes just to be eye level with Shinso lessened the effect a little. When Izuku regains control of his body, he shakes his head and blinks before regaining his composure. He casts a cautious glance at Shinso, who appears irritated but not as furious as before. Shinso says, "We were just talking," and then frowns. "I shouldn't have used my quirk though, I do apologize for that. It won't happen again, I promise." Izuku starts off by saying, he's not sure what to say because it wasn't okay, but he also realizes that he might have been provoking the other boy. It wasn't just Izuku who had a claim to make. "Oh great, an apology, that means a lot," the irate Kurudo responds. "While you're at it, why don't you apologize for leaving that note on Midoriya's desk this morning? Let's see you smooth talk your way out of that one." Shinso's eyes get darker. Taiketsu frowns as she moves between Shinso and Kurudo, presumably to stop Kurudo from doing something foolish. "Hey, let's all calm down," she says. Izuku glances around and notices that some other stragglers are lingering and observing the altercation. It's only the second day of school, and already his friends have defended him twice today for trivial, pointless things. This is really embarrassing. Taiketsu turns calmly to Shinso after telling Kurudo, "Unless you have something you'd like to say, there's no need to go throwing around false accusations." "I don't know why you would think I did that," responds Shinso coldly. Another voice close by declares, "That's a lie," breaking the tension between Shinso and Kurudo. Shinso puts some distance between them as Kurudo falls back to his feet. He saw them with narrowed eyes from Nakadai, one of his classmates, who was standing by the gym door. Since Izuku hasn't seen or heard much of him yet, he strikes me as being unyielding and rigid. He had a thin build, a shaved head, and was about Izuku's height, perhaps a bit taller. According to what Izuku recalls from yesterday, he had a peculiar talent for spotting lies. Izuku's earlier statement becomes clear, and he blinks at this realization. He turns to look at Shinso, who has an unhappy expression on his face. That being said, Shinso turns and stalks out of the gym, giving Nakadai a quick glare before heading out. "I'm sorry if I've caused you any trouble, but I wanted you to know that I'm in this to win. I don't intend to lose to some kid who thinks he can become a hero without a quirk." Nakadai says to no one in particular, "It's unfortunate to see that UA has dropped its standards to allow a brute such as him to be accepted," before glancing at Izuku. Nakadai nods and walks out of the gym. "I have no stake in this. I just hate seeing people use their lies and quirks without consequence. I would watch yourself if I were you," he says. Taiketsu and Izuku smile slightly at his attempt to lighten the mood. "Geez," Patrick says, rubbing his hand across his face, "why do we have so many weird, intense people in our class?" As he glares at the door where Shinso and Nakadai had left, Kurudo remains tense. "Kurudo, man, let it go. Besides, school is over, we should be out doing something fun. What do you say? Anyone up for ice cream sundaes? There's a great place by my dad's house." Izuku, who is still uneasy about what just transpired, says quietly, "I don't know if I'm really up for that right now." Everyone, from Kachin to Shinso, seems to be working against him just when he feels like he's making progress. "You're okay though, right?" frowns Taiketsu. "He didn't hurt you or anything, did he?" When Izuku says, "No, of course not," he shakes his head. Shinso hadn't actually done anything to him, but Kurudo had exaggerated the situation once more. Though he knows Kurudo won't comprehend and will only take offense, he kind of wants to say something about it. He rubs at his eyes, thinking, having friends is hard. "I'm fine really, I just think I should head home now. It's been a crazy day and all." Patrick smiles and gives him the thumbs up. "Yeah man, whatever you need to do," he says. "We do gotta hang out one of these days though." "Agreed," Kurudo says, "we still need to find time to train together too. We need to move on and forget all this ugliness that happened." He advances and pats Izuku on the shoulder. Have a good night and, remember, you promised to let us know if Shinso or anyone starts bothering you again. Izuku concludes haltingly, feeling oddly exhausted, don't need your protection or to be treated like a child who can't handle their own problems, will. Izuku feels like he's back in middle school again, stuck as the oddball loser forever, even though yesterday had been so wonderful. Dully, he says, I'll see you guys tomorrow, and leaves the gym. Izuku puts on his regular uniform once more and departs the school in a dejected mood. He quickens his pace and hoists his backpack onto his shoulders. And to think that he had begun the day with hope and excitement. Although day 2 wasn't the best, you can't have a winner every day, can you? There had to be a better tomorrow. Izuku was running behind schedule when he came upon Yue because he had run a bit too long this morning and missed the early train. Despite the pain in his muscles, he grits his teeth and finds it difficult to accelerate. He is aware that he has been going overboard, but these past few days have been extremely stressful, and the only thing that seems to help him relax these days is working out. At the very least, Izuku hopes that today will be more tranquil than the previous 2. A microphone is thrust into Izuku's face, and he squeaks, "What do you think of having All Might as a teacher?" He scans the area nervously and notices that the school is surrounded by a sea of reporters. The female reporter presses the microphone a bit closer and asks again, is he as good a teacher as he is a hero? A man puts another microphone in Izuku's face as he backs up a few steps. Is All Might as handsome in real life as he is on TV? What does he do in his spare time when he's not teaching? Hey kid, haven't I seen you somewhere before? Izuku says, shakily. Izuku might as well have claimed to have leprosy because the cameras and microphones cut off so fast. I'm a general education student, haven't met All Might. Izuku, a different student, approaches and catches the reporter's attention, believing he knows them from one of the hero courses. Izuku has enough time to quickly sneak through the gates and enter the school's relative safety thanks to that. He exhales deeply, a little relieved that no one inquired as to why he was going through the gate closest to the hero classrooms but farthest away from his own. He liked to act like he was training to be a professional hero for a few seconds, but that wasn't wrong, was it? When the warning bell rang and he realized he was still running late, he squeaked. When the last bell rings, he is halfway down the hall despite his frantic running. A few seconds later, he staggers into class. Izuku sighs as he walks to his seat. I apologize for being late, Shiora-sensei. I swear it won't happen again. At his arrival, Sensei arches an eyebrow. Sensei pauses to clear his throat before saying, You're excused this time Midoriya, as those vultures lurking outside the school have made quite a few students late this morning. A flurry of whispers breaks out in the class as friends start discussing who they should vote for. Well, that's neither here nor there. Now that everyone's here, I have an important announcement. Now that we're properly settled, it's time to pick class representatives. We will be casting votes. The person with the most votes will be the class representative and the second most will be the assistant representative. Everyone falls silent once more as Sensei's desk slams with papers. Before continuing, Shiora-sensei fixes them with his amber eyes. I understand that 2 days is not a lot time to get to know your classmates well enough to base an opinion. Therefore, I'm allowing everyone who wishes to compete for the positions to give a short presentation, 2 minutes or less, on why you should vote for them. You have the rest of homeroom and the rest of your day to put something together. Tomorrow, you will be presenting and voting. Please let me know before the end of homeroom if you're going to run for the position. That is all. Motone says, oh man, class representative is quite a big deal, as she turns around in her chair. It's a great to have on your resume, plus it gives you a great chance to get leadership experience. Are you guys thinking of running? Patrick rubs his neck and responds, no, that's a little more responsibility than I think I can handle. Patrick turns to Izuku, who trembles slightly at the remark. But I think you'd be a great rep, Motone. What about you, Midoriya? I'm sure you're planning on running. Nice entrance by the way, he says. A year ago, class representative, the idea would have been absurd, but now. I don't know, I'm sure there's much more capable people in here than me. I think you'd do a great job, Korudo says, waving his hand. You're smart as hell, observant, and compassionate, and you have just as much of a chance as I do. Taketsu asks, oh, are you running, Korudo? You bet, Korudo says with a grin, mostly because my parents expect it of me, but I still think I could do some good. Taketsu adds, well, that makes me 3, and smiles shyly. I was class representative my first year in middle school. It was a lot of work, but I enjoyed being involved. I think I could probably do it again here. Izuku recommends, we should all plan our presentations during lunch. I'd even be willing to stay after school to work on it. If we collaborate, we can make our presentations as professional as possible. When Motone throws a balled-up piece of paper at his head, Korudo frowns and yells, I don't know, aren't we all competing against each other? Should we really be working together? Only one of us can get the position, survival of the fittest and all. As Korudo complains and rubs his head, the others carry on talking. Don't twist Darwin to suit your own purposes, nothing of meaning is obtained by working in a vacuum. Besides, all we're doing is compiling our thoughts and thinking how to best present ourselves. It's the class who gets to decide if we're getting the position or not. Before displaying two peace signs, Patrick declares, as class representative, I will abolish the restrictive uniform, give tired students the opportunity to nap on campus, and ensure that everyone is allowed to skate within the halls. 4 more years, he adds, grinning wildly. After giving him a displeased glance, Taketsu turns to face Izuku sharply. What plans do you have, Midoriya? How would you shape 1C if you had the opportunity? From behind them, Patrick cries, Aw come on Taketsu, you know I was just messing around, don't give me the cold shoulder. With thoughtfulness, Izuku replies, I don't know really, maybe, I'd work on making the general education students feel empowered and not just like hero rejects. Everyone always focuses on the heroes and I would want people to know that it's okay to not have a combat quirk or to even be quirkless. Plus I'd like to help those people achieve their goals even if it is heroics with a non-traditional quirk. Isn't that a little self-serving considering you're also shooting for heroics? Korudo grumbles. Speaking of which, are the kids who want to transfer able to even compete? It'd be pretty bad if you got elected only to change classes. When the bell rang to announce the end of homeroom and the beginning of first period, Izuku was unable to react to that very real idea. Because he was too preoccupied with the impending election for class representative and whether he would run, he finds it difficult to focus on what was going on in class. Korudo was right when he said that if Izuku were elected class representative, it would be challenging for him to maintain his training regimen. Previously, he had never bothered to run for office, primarily because he was aware that no one would support him, but now things were different. He bites his lip and looks down at his notebook, which is empty. Isn't that the catch? Although it would be challenging to oversee and it's uncertain whether he would truly accomplish anything worthwhile, he had never had the chance to test his abilities. It had been worthless this and worthless that throughout his life. He wanted to at least have the chance to try, no matter how realistic he was. Furthermore, wasn't part of hero work leadership. He might see it as more practice for his mind and a chance to show off his skills. Having made up his mind, Izuku starts writing down his ideas in his notebook, disregarding the teacher's posts on the board. He only has one day to prepare a presentation that will persuade his classmates that the oddball child could represent their class, but he could always get the notes from one of the others later. Congratulations on getting voted class rep, Iida, Uraraka exclaims cheerfully as she passes her friend's desk. Why thank you, Uraraka, Iida says with a fleeting smile before clearing his throat and assuming a more formal demeanor. I appreciate your congratulations. I can only hope that I am able to live up to the expectations my classmates have put upon me. This is an important job and good training for my future career. I promise to do my best to guide the class. Iida continues to gesture wildly with his hands. Bakugo says, watch it you four-eyed shit, swerving to the side to avoid Iida's gestures. Your hand comes near me again, I'll make you fucking eat it. Iida replies coldly, believe me, it was an accident, despite Bakugo having already left the classroom with a furious expression on his face. Asui, please call her Suyu. Sometimes I wonder if Bakugo really wants to be a hero, Uraraka croaks behind her. I think what he really wants is the license to cause public destruction. Yeah, he gives me the creeps, shivers Uraraka. I thought for sure he was going to kill me in the battle trial yesterday. Even All Might didn't know what to do when he brought down that building. Jiro says, well, he needs to get his act together fast, as he leans away from Yaoyorozu. I overheard Aizawa-sensei say that our class either needs to lose or gain a student in order to have an even number. Transfers into heroics are pretty rare, so Bakugo's position seems tenuous, though personally I'd choose to boot Mineta over him. Oh my, sighs Yaoyorozu, her mouth shut. Given how he acted in the battle trial, I don't want to know what Bakugo would do if Aizawa-sensei tried to expel him. He looked like he was going to get violent with the reporters when I was coming in today. I hate to agree with Bakugo, but I also was quite upset to see those miscreants hanging around this morning. Iida shakes her head. I'm sure they must be breaking some zoning law by congregating there and obstructing entrances. Suyu shrugs. They're probably gone by now, and picks up her bag. It's not like they'll get their story hanging around the closed gates all day. Come on, let's get to lunch. Yes, Iida exclaims as he gets to his feet, slicing his hand through the air. Let us cease talking about unpleasant things such as Bakugo or reporters. Instead, let us focus on the positive aspects of our learning experience here at UA, such as the chance to get to know all of you. Iida, Uraraka says, blushing, and lightly taps her friend's shoulder. You must get so tired hanging out with us girls all the time. Why don't you try talking to some of the other boys? I have tried. Kirishima is a good upstanding student, but he mostly spends his time with Ashido, Shiro and Kaminari. I tried to strike up a conversation on the first day with Todoroki, but he made it clear he was not interested. Iida carefully raises his glasses. I'm afraid I haven't had much of a chance to get to know the others as our teachers have kept us quite busy. Suyu adds, don't worry Iida, it's still pretty early in the semester, as they proceed down the corridor. And who knows, maybe instead of an expulsion, we'll get a new student added to our class. That'd be interesting. I wonder what that would be like. Uraraka responds. Behind them are Izuku and his Class 1C friends crossing the hallway. As they head to their lockers to get some supplies to work on during lunch, they are engaged in animated conversation. Both groups continue to go their separate ways without noticing one another. Motome, obviously in her element, orders, okay, who wants to practice their presentation? This is a friendly environment, no judgments. Kanaki's dear ears are twitching with evident nervousness as she flips through some note cards at their table today. Taketsu appears nervous as well, clenching and unclenching her fists while mentally practicing lines. Before leaving, Izuku wanted to hear what the other boy had to say, so he looked longingly at Korudo. Korudo declares, I guess it's up to me then, with a dramatic sigh. My name is Korudo Dan and I'm a general education student just like you, but I have a vision for this class. I see a class that can compete against the hero class, that can show those arrogant kids with their flashy quirks that we are just as talented and capable as they are. I vow. Motome says, stop, and raises her arms in an X. Korudo sulks as some of them giggle softly, but he obediently reviews his notes. Make it more about improving our class and less about your petty feud with the hero kids. Akane, you're sensible, can you please show Korudo how it's done? Taketsu lets out a squeak, oh, me. Well, I'm still working on it, but I was thinking about, Taketsu began, but her words were interrupted by a siren that sounded loudly throughout the cafeteria. Izuku jumps around in his chair, trying to figure out what was making the noise. It reverberates throughout the cafeteria and out into the hallways. Security level 3 has been breached, students please evacuate promptly. Everyone is instantly up and running in the direction of the cafeteria's small entrance. Motome leaps to his feet and takes Kanaki's hand, saying, Security level 3, I read about that in the student manual. That means unauthorized personnel have gotten into the school. We've got to get out of here. Even as Patrick abuses him and starts pulling him along with the others, Izuku yells, we can't all fit through doors, not to mention the hallway is too small to hold us all, trying to be heard over the commotion. Patrick replies, worry about that later, despite being bumped into and losing control of Izuku. Then he found himself alone in a crowd. Izuku makes an effort to stay upright so he doesn't get lost in the crowd. He had trouble seeing through the crowd because he wasn't very tall. In the confusion, even Patrick, who was nearly 2 meters tall and could light up like a glowstick, was difficult to find. Izuku grunts as his cheek is pressed awkwardly into the wall and he is pushed roughly against the side. Too many people were shouting, making it difficult to tell one voice from another. If they weren't being attacked by villains or something, their only option was to safely navigate through this mess and meet up outside. The unexpected appearance of a boy floating into the air diverts Izuku's attention. He becomes extremely dizzy and begins to spin dramatically. Izuku blinks. What was that child's peculiarity? In any case, the boy positions himself so that he is above the doorway, where people are still frantically trying to enter. The boy exclaims, everyone calm down. From his absurd stance, it's okay. The students' throng falls silent as though a switch had been flipped, and soon everyone is staring at the student above the doorway. Izuku inhales deeply as the pressure holding him against the wall lessens, allowing him more motion. It's just the press. There's nothing to panic about. You're at UA. Conduct yourself in a manner befitting the highest academia. He exclaims. Although there was still a lot of noise, people were moving much more subduedly and neatly. The angle was too awkward, but Izuku craned his neck up to get a glimpse of the boy who had saved the day. He was most likely one of the hero kids, and Izuku truly wants to thank him. Nobody else could have taken that action. Suddenly, he found himself on the backyard lawn. He notices Chiura-sensei counting students off to one side. His teacher only said, "Ah, there you are, Midoriya, get in line," before dragging Izuku back into a crowd. With a slight glow, Patrick moaned, "Dude, I'm so sorry I lost you. I tried to grab you again but the crowd had eaten you up." As the rest of his class spoke in loud, frantic tones. Izuku dismisses the well-intentioned hands and peers outside the group. Outside the gates, police cars flashed, and some officers and teachers were seen escorting what appeared to be reporters off campus. UA's security was legendary, and his eyes narrowed. Since no one entered the gates without a pass, how were so many reporters able to enter covertly? Korudo says, "Weird huh?" as he approaches Izuku from behind and wears a contemplative expression, somewhat startling him. It looks like the UA barrier was broken down, seems a bit much for some hack reporters. Izuku nods, still lost in thought. "Yeah," she says. "Are you okay? I lost track of you early on," he says. When Korudo says, "It'll take a lot more than some shoving to keep me down," he affirms. "I was more worried about you. Patrick was freaking out when he lost you. Good thing that hero kid calmed everyone down or you'd have been trampled for sure." Izuku spits out, "You know, quirkless doesn't mean helpless," before he has a chance to reflect. Izuku opens his mouth to respond to his friend's utter disregard for his feelings, but then closes it again. "Hey, lay off, we're just concerned for you is all. Don't need to act like a jerk. Come on, I think Sensei is dragging us back in. Hopefully they'll let us have a bit more time for lunch. Getting into fights he couldn't win wouldn't make the already crazy day any better." Although they were able to finish their lunches, they were permitted to remain in their classrooms because the cafeteria was still in disarray. Izuku eats his katsudon in silence as the others converse nearby. He's too busy thinking about the class elections and wondering how the media got past UA's security to be hanging out with his friends at the moment. He's also still contemplating whether Izuku could ever match that hero boy's speed and skill, particularly if Korudo and Patrick continued to treat Izuku as though he needed protection. Izuku surveys his classroom, where lively conversation is taking place. While Taketsu is hunched over her desk, ignoring her food to write as if she were possessed, Patrick is leaning back in his chair and attempting to speak with her. Kiyoshi is attempting to mediate the argument between Korudo and Motome as they stand next to each other. Izuku questions whether he has what it takes to be a good hero and a good representative. He recalls that boy who had been able to soothe people with a few brief words while spinning through the air. He would get there, but he still had a long way to go before he was that good. Izuku would continue to pursue that dream until he achieved it, even if it meant sacrificing something in the process. The following morning, Chiura-sensei starts off with his typical droll greeting, "All right class, I trust with all the excitement yesterday you didn't forget to prepare your presentations for class representative. We'll be starting now, please keep quiet while your classmates are speaking." He glances at his list. "We'll be going in class order. Motomako, you're up first." She turns around and asks, "Me?" with surprise, but Midoriya is ahead of me. Izuku simply shrugs. "I dropped out. Sorry I didn't mention it yesterday. I need to prioritize my time based on my goals and so I can't give the position the time and effort it deserves." Sensei nods, a sentiment I can respect. "Now, Motome." Motome concludes her lengthy speech by outlining all the policy changes she would implement in her capacity as class representative and how she would use a convoluted reward-punishment system to reduce crime. Before she can say anything more, Chiura-sensei interrupts. With a piercing gaze, Nakadai delivers his brief speech, discussing how he would honor UA's principles and use his ability to detect lies to solve any issues that came up. When Kamoto explains that he would use his position to make life as easy as possible for the class, he makes a fool of himself. A few of his friends laugh, but Sensei's savage glare instantly silences them. Before she could even leave her seat, Kaneki bows out, as if she were about to lose her nerves. A slightly altered version of his cafeteria spiel, Korudo's presentation concentrated on enhancing the general education standing and morale in order to compete with the heroes. Last in line, Taikatsu nervously fidgets with her fingers as she walks to the front of the class. She says, "We are a school divided, with discomfort. General, business, support and heroics. Yesterday's incident showed us that when the slightest bit of uncertainty is added, we fall apart. I propose, if elected as class representative, that I will work to repair the divisions between us. We are all UA students, each of us smart and accomplished in our own ways. I say we stop comparing ourselves to other classes and start working with them. Drawing strength from heroics, innovation from support and management from business. In my vision, we work together as one school to achieve our highest potential and through our unity, truly go beyond." She bows briefly and then returns to her spot with her head up and her shoulders back, bright red face. "Good work everyone," Chiura-sensei remarks, glaring at Komodo with a sinister expression. Izuku couldn't help but smile. The answer was so clear to him. "Everyone, take out a piece of paper and write the person you believe is most qualified. Again, the class representative will receive the most votes, and the assistant representative will come in second. Be sure to vote based on merit. You'll be stuck with these representatives all year long, so choose well." Taikatsu received 6, Nakadai received 7, Motome received 4, Korudo received 1, and Komodo received 0. As the results are written out, she stares at the board with wide eyes. Patrick gives her a nervous shoulder rub before she gets up and moves to the front of the class. Sensei nods, signaling them to go back to their seats. "All right, Nakadai Kenshin is your class representative and Taikatsu Akane is your assistant representative. You both did excellent jobs. I expect good work from the two of you. Now we still have a few minutes left in homeroom. I want to go over some safety features of the school. Taikatsu was right that our response yesterday was shameful and next time, it might not be a couple of reporters." As they swarm the hallway following morning classes, Patrick beams and hugs Taikatsu tightly. "Congratulations, girl," he exclaims. "I thought you were amazing. You'll be a great assistant representative. That's why I voted for you." "What?" Korudo exclaims, clutching his hips. "You voted for her and not me. Is it because she's a girl?" "No, it was because Akane gave a stirring speech about fostering an environment of collaboration where you were still trying to turn this into some kind of competition with the hero courses." Motome replies with a dry expression. She waves amiably as she leaves, adding, "I hate to lose, but if I had to lose, I'm glad it was to someone as pretty as you. Good job. Let me know if I can help with anything." "I guess it was a pretty good speech," complains Korudo. "Nice work Taikatsu. I think you'll be a good fit. But better watch out next year, I'll get you for sure." Patrick grinned and said, "Learn how to appeal to your audience instead of your ego, temperature boy," as he and Izuku and Taikatsu left, Korudo steaming in the background. "And I say we celebrate. How about we all go out for ice cream after school today? My treat for our new assistant representative." Izuku rubs his neck and says, I can't. I have training with my master this afternoon. Perhaps tomorrow, though, or over the weekend. You work too hard, Midoriya. I admire your dedication to being awesome, but you gotta take it easy sometimes. Seriously though, we have got to get together soon and just hang out. I don't know about you guys, but this week has stressed me out. It's only Thursday." Patrick keeps ranting about nothing and everything. Izuku smiles. This new normal of mine was nice. It was Mifune, the red-headed, anxious psychic in their class, who said quietly, "Hey, did you guys hear?" He keeps playing with his phone without glancing at them. His gaze flickers up and back down to the screen. All Might was spotted in the hallways by Hero Gym. Despite the fact that he's supposed to be teaching here, no one has really seen him, but apparently he's out right now. Izuku quickly shouts, "I have to go to the bathroom," and moves away from his friends. Izuku clarifies, not pausing to hear their response to his admittedly weak excuse, I mean I have to use the restroom. Right now, immediately. You guys go on ahead, I'll catch up to you in the cafeteria. If he could actually meet All Might, it would be worth it for his friends to think he was some sort of weirdo. He has been looking for the number one for days and has not even found him yet. He was running, but that had nothing to do with his heart thumping in his chest. He has a lot of questions for All Might regarding his peculiarity and his views on bravery. Izuku's main question, though, is whether a strange, unlikable person like him can be a hero. He slows to a steady, methodical pace as he skips around the corner. Okay, so where was All Might now that he had arrived at the hero gym? Despite his agitation, Izuku tries to look indifferent as he moves up and down the hallway. No, he couldn't have missed the number one because he was so close to meeting him. He has made a few more loops and even ventured down some nearby hallways, but all he has discovered is disappointment. At least no one has to witness his complete humiliation because the halls are deserted because everyone is eating lunch. Izuku discovers that he has already missed the first 15 minutes of lunch when he looks at his watch. He will only have a little time to eat before afternoon classes start, even if he rushes back. He considers skipping lunch, but ultimately decides against it in order to avoid the questions he knows his friends will ask and to continue searching for All Might. He cannot possibly go through Rikamaru Shisho's training without eating. In addition, Taiketsu was supposed to have her chance to shine, but he completely blew her off to pursue a person who might as well be a fantasy. Ultimately, he was responsible for what transpired. Izuku is rushing down the hall without really thinking because his mind is so busy with too many things. He is too preoccupied with how to make amends to Taiketsu without coming across as strange and how to justify his strange behavior to his friends. In addition to wondering why All Might is so difficult to locate, he wants to explain why she merited his vote without upsetting Korudo. All of these thoughts allow him to enter the cafeteria with a casual demeanor, as if nothing could harm him. When the cafeteria is crowded, he forgets why he usually enjoys going in because it's easy to blend in with the crowd. The fact that the hero students eat lunch at the same time as everyone else is briefly forgotten by him. Deku. Izuku instinctively freezes at the well-known taunt. Everything about him has stopped, even though he should be moving and separating himself from his old friend as much as possible. In an instant, he finds himself back in middle school, with no choice but to endure the inevitable. Izuku's entire universe constricts to the tingling sound of Kachan's hand sparking menacingly as a rough hand snatches at his uniform. "You piece of shit, what the hell do you think you're doing here?" Kachan asks. Izuku stammers, his tongue heavy in his mouth as he tries to force the words out around the fear clogging his throat. Why you know I got into YUA, K Kachan, why you've known for months now." Kachan pulls him forward until he's directly in front of Izuku. "Do you think I met you yesterday, you useless Deku? You think I haven't seen your shitty face hanging around my classroom or scribbling in your dumb fucking notebook?" he asks. Izuku feels that something is wrong, even though Kachan appears to be the same as usual, with his glowering red eyes and coarse sneer. Izuku should normally have a bruise or two by now, but Kachan is treating him as gently as possible and doesn't even appear to be attempting to harm him. "I know you're hoping to transfer to the hero program and I'm telling you right now to give up. You think you're hot shit because of that sludge incident. You're a fucking quirkless nothing and you'll never be a." Though he could probably infer from 10 years of similar remarks what Kachan had to say, Izuku will never know as his head abruptly whips to the side as if he had been hit. Izuku blinked and took advantage of the moment to escape Kachan's grasp. He fixes his gaze on Kachan's face, focusing on the lengthy line of blood that extends from his neck to the area just beneath his eye. Kachan furiously and bewilderedly rubs his fingers against the blood on his face. When he asks, "What the fuck?" Korudo and Patrick leap forward, shove Kachan back a few steps, and position themselves between them. Now that he was properly aware of what was happening, Izuku noticed that a large portion of the cafeteria had calmed down and was closely observing them. Kachan quickly recovers from his shock and growls, appearing prepared for battle. As before, a dazzling red streak moves through the air before coming to a halt and solidifying into a long, thin point that hovers menacingly in front of Kachan's face. "Who the fuck are you? Get lost. This is between me and Deku." As the threat materializes, Kachan glowers, and his gaze shifts to Taiketsu, who has emerged behind Izuku with one hand openly bleeding and the other held in taut concentration. "I don't care who you think you are, but you can't just attack someone in the middle of the cafeteria," Korudo mutters. Uncertainty is evident on Patrick's face despite his best efforts to project a sense of menace through his greater height. The only movement in Taiketsu's motionless face is the soft trickle of blood from her hand onto the ground. Kachan takes a few steps forward, and Patrick takes a nervous step back as Korudo maintains his position. "I don't have to listen to anything you extras say, you're fucking Gen Ed kids, you don't mean shit." Taiketsu, on the other hand, advances and approaches closely as she draws more blood from her open wound, solidifies it, and creates two more sharpened points that are pointed directly at Kachan's throat. "I think you had better step back right now," Taiketsu says quietly as she meets Kachan's crimson eyes. When two other boys violently pull Kachan back, his sneer gets deeper, and it really looks like they're going to fight. A blonde boy with a black lightning-shaped stripe in his hair demands, looking from Kachan to their group, "Dude, what the hell are you doing?" Kachan breaks his glare with Taikatsu to sneer at the blonde. "You're already on thin ice after that stunt you pulled in the battle trial and now you're picking fights. You sure you didn't mean to sign up for the villain course instead?" He asks. "Nobody fucking asked you. Now get off of me, I'm not fucking done yet." "Yeah man," the other boy, whose hair was extremely bright red, says with a frown of disapproval. Kachan's other shoulder is held by a hand that changes until it becomes rock solid. "I think you are." Although Kachan is having trouble in the hold, the two boys are managing to keep him in check. Izuku suddenly flushes and backs off until he is behind Taikatsu and Patrick. He feels foolish and embarrassed because he was only able to cower when his friends had to save him twice this week. He claims that he aspires to be a hero, but perhaps Kachan is correct and he simply lacks the necessary resources. The red-headed boy says to them, "Sorry about Bakugo," in spite of Kachan's furious struggles. He looks at Taikatsu and her blood spears that hover. Taikatsu holds her makeshift weapons steady while humming, "Wicked Quirk by the way. You can put them down now, he won't bother you anymore." The blonde boy smiles wryly and says, "Yeah, we're still training this one, he's a bit of a handful if you haven't noticed. Don't let him give you a bad impression of us hero kids, we're not all psychopaths." Kachan yells in the blonde's face, "What did you fucking call me?" But the blonde doesn't even appear to be fazed. The two of them immediately remove Kachan from the scene. The redhead's bright smile reveals sharp teeth, far sharper than Taikatsu's. "Sorry again. Enjoy the rest of your lunch. We'll take care of him," she says. Kachan easily finds Izuku's eyes as he turns his glare back towards their group. Kachan jumps as if he's been electrocuted. "You think you can be a hero like that, Deku? Hiding behind the riff-raff? I better not see your stupid fucking face around anymore, you hear me? You stay the hell away from," he says. The other blonde murmurs, "Geez, give it a break already or I'll up the voltage," with a dejected expression on his face. As Kachan reluctantly allows his classmates to pull him away, Izuku hears him mutter to the other boy, "Aizawa-sensei is going to love this." Izuku hates himself for the relief that bubbles up in his chest after Kachan and the other boys are swallowed up by the crowd. He was a hero. Taikatsu, who had been so composed throughout the altercation, lets out a deep sigh as her blood spears melt and fall to the ground with a dull splat. "Oh my god, who the hell was that crazy kid? I thought he was going to kill us." As normalcy takes back control, all signs of her previous poise appear to vanish. With a pale, exhausted face, she rolls her head to look at him and asks, "Midoriya, are you okay? What is it about you that attracts these kinds of people?" He glances down at her hand, which is still dripping blood lazily onto the floor, creating a rather sizable puddle. Grasping Taikatsu's shoulders and shaking her gently, Korudo says, "Forget that, are you okay?" "Criminy, that's an awful lot of blood." He himself appears rather pale and sickly. In a panicked, high-pitched voice, he asks, "Can you stop the bleeding? Can you walk? The three of us could probably carry you to Recovery Girl if you need it. How much blood can you lose? Will you need a transfusion?" After pushing him back a few steps, Taikatsu raises her uninjured hand and gently pulses it until the open wound on her other palm is completely clotted. "Korudo, I'm fine. It's about as much as you'd lose for a blood donation, here let me just." She still appears quite exhausted even though the bleeding has stopped. Taking that as a cue, Patrick puts one arm around Taikatsu's waist and gently leads her back to their table. "Look at this mess. Just let me sit down for a second and then I'll clean it up." Izuku, still flushed with shame, shuffles behind. Korudo demands, glaring up at the ceiling and away from the pool of blood, "Who was the guy Midoriya? He looked like he was in the hero class but he seemed like he knew you. You haven't been picking fights without us, have you? Kachan and I went to middle school together but we've known each other pretty much our whole lives. We actually used to be friends, right up until his quirk developed and mine didn't. He's always been like that," Izuku says while they are all seated at the dinner table. Unable to face his friends at this moment, he turns away. He risks a glance up at Taikatsu, who is leaning slightly against the table and still looking a little pale. "It was my fault for not being more careful. I knew Kachan would be in here and I just sort of forgot for a moment. He says, I'm sorry you guys got dragged into that, and I'm especially sorry I didn't do more to control the situation. Patrick leans over the table and points at Izuku, saying, "Don't you dare apologize for that creep, do you hear me? Don't you ever apologize for someone hurting you. That's no one's fault but his, and, hell, everyone who let it get to that point. Are you telling me that punk has been treating you like that for that long? And no one did anything about it?" Izuku trembles a little, unnerved not only by Patrick's fierce stare but also by his words. He can't think of anyone else besides his mother who ever told him that Kachan's actions were inappropriate, including children, teachers, and homeless people. Since things have always been that way, he has never really given it much thought, but now that he thinks about it, Patrick is right. Izuku shrugs self-consciously. "I mean, it's not that big of a deal," she says. "It's like with the note, things have always been that way. Because Kachan's got such a great quirk for hero work, he could basically do whatever he wanted." Patrick firmly states, "That's not right," his skin glimmering a little with agitation. "I don't care how fancy his quirk is, that's not how heroes are supposed to be. You should report this incident and cite whatever else he's done. I'm sure the hero department doesn't want a maniac in their program." "What? No, I couldn't look, it's fine, I don't want to get Kachan in trouble," Izuku murmurs. Taiketsu says, "Maybe we should table this for another time, Patrick," while sipping her water slowly. She meets his eyes and gives him a gentle smile, saying, "It's been a pretty exciting week for us all. But you did endure, you didn't let challenges or bullies keep you down. Sometimes being brave isn't about leaping into action, sometimes it's just doing your best when everything goes wrong." "She's right, you know," Korudo asserts, nodding wisely. "Well, they both are, but Taiketsu's always right, we'll tackle that issue another day. All I can say is if that bully shows his face again, I'll show him just what us general education kids can do." He continues to pound his fist against his palm. Patrick looks a little more composed as he says, "Dude, no offense, but I'd rather send in the girl who can make blood weapons than the guy who can occasionally serve as a space heater." At that remark, Izuku can't help but snort with laughter. Anticipating an outburst, he covers his mouth and turns to face Korudo. With his fists resting on the table, Korudo displays annoyance, but he eventually manages to smile awkwardly. Even as his eyes assure Patrick that there will be retribution, Korudo grits his teeth and says, "Yeah, good one, you sure got me, pal." Patrick simply makes kissy faces at Korudo while leaning his elbow on the table and holding his cheek in his palm. Taiketsu takes another sip of water to conceal her smile from them. Despite his progress, Izuku still feels uneasy about what transpired and about being Kachan's victim. However, he also believes that Patrick's statements might have some validity. Perhaps he was not deserving of Kachan's brutality. Perhaps his dream still held some promise. From his bag, Izuku takes an energy bar, which he chews thoughtfully. Even though the road seems longer than ever, he has already made great progress alone, without any peculiarities or companions. Izuku watches as Taiketsu stands in the middle of Patrick and Korudo's playful pushing match, attempting to stop them. Izuku questions how much he can accomplish with a little assistance. As he sidesteps Izuku's blows as if they were insignificant, Rikamaru Shisho remarks nonchalantly, "So I take it things aren't going as planned at your new school, huh?" Izuku clenches his teeth and modifies his strategy, incorporating some of his Aikido training to add variation to his approach. Shisho raises an eyebrow in response to his efforts, but he still dodges or counters. Shisho continues as he abruptly roots himself to the ground with his quirk, "I didn't meet you yesterday, kid. You only get this angry about not being able to hit me if something is bothering you, and, since you don't have much of a life outside of school or training, it wasn't hard to guess." With a languid smile, he gestures Izuku forward with his hand. He is correct in one regard, though. Izuku is irritated and unable to stop mentally reliving the previous week's events, both positive and negative. With all the conflicting ideas and feelings in his head, he feels as though he will blow up. However, this was easy. Izuku leaps forward and gives his master everything he has, flashing his own toothy grin. He punches, kicks, ducks, and leaps away, only to dash back in headfirst until his troubling thoughts are reduced to a buzz, concealed by his aching muscles and thumping heart. His master has obviously been luring him for the past few minutes, but Izuku just doesn't know how to give up until Shisho finally gets him. However, Izuku is flat on his back after a swift blow to the jaw and a sweep at his feet. As he begins to sit up, he discovers that he is far too exhausted to even get out of bed. Shisho falls elegantly next to him as his head thumps back to the ground with a soft moan. What would you like to talk about first? The fact that you've clearly been overworking yourself again, or whatever happened at school that has you so upset? Shisho's tone becomes raspy. Even based on Izuku's heavily edited descriptions, Shisho has never been fond of Kachan. You're not having any more trouble with that bully of yours. You mentioned that he got into Yue's heroics department. No one could shield Kachan from the consequences if his master ever learned the whole truth about what Izuku's childhood friend had said and done. Izuku tries to catch his breath and says, I did have a run-in with Kachan this afternoon in the cafeteria, slowly. He goes on after noticing the gloomy expression on his Rikamaru Shisho's face. It wasn't that bad, really. Kachan was being himself, but he didn't hurt me at all. There were some kids in his class who dragged him off and, my friend stood up for me too. As if he weren't posing a question like a single mother, Shisho gives stern instructions, saying, someone needs to put a leash on that kid. But you said you've made some friends. I like them already, tell me about them. Izuku smiles a little at the picture. Well, there's a couple of people I talk to sometimes, but I've mostly been hanging out with these other guys. There's Korudo, he can change his body temperature, it takes some time, but he's real proud of his quirk. He's brash and he doesn't understand me, but he's got a good heart. Taketsu is pretty, she's taller than me and is friendly but also sarcastic and funny. You should have seen her standing up to Kachan today, you'd like her. Then there's Takamitsu, but he asks us to call him Patrick. He's Japanese American. I don't think he could be any more energetic or friendly if he tried. He keeps the mood light when things got stressful. Izuku beams with affection, they're real great. Meeting them was the highlight of the week. We're all aiming for the hero course. Well, Taketsu keeps changing her mind and I'm not sure how serious Patrick and Korudo really are. I told them I'd help train them, but we haven't really found the time yet. Shisho nods and says, I'm glad. A boy like you deserves a good group of friends, before getting up with the same grace that he had used when he sat down. Izuku gets up much less elegantly than his master, but he eventually gets up. Okay, your break is over. Work through some of your stretches before your muscles get stiff. Trust me, you'll thank me later. They spend a few minutes quietly and slowly stretching as part of their cool-down routine. So what's really bothering you, Midoriya? Rikamaru Shisho inquires. It's more than the bully, I can tell, so spill it. I've put a great deal of work into you, I can't have you go ruining all my hard work by you taking out your frustrations on your body. Don't tell me it's nothing. I can tell you've been overdoing your exercises again, unless you think that you can get into the hero course exhausted and overworked. Izuku retorts, well, maybe I can't get into the hero course no matter what I do, and then covers his mouth with his hand. In addition to being extremely impolite, Izuku had been suppressing that specific insecurity since the start of school. Meeting Kachan today had only brought it to the surface. Maybe it's just impossible to be a hero without a quirk. No matter what kind of training I have, no matter how much I want it, maybe I just don't have the right stuff. Shisho asks sharply, where'd this come from? As he looks down at Izuku, who recoils in fear. You've poured your heart and soul into this dream, why are you questioning it now? He lifts his eyes. Was it the bully? No, I mean yeah, a little, but, Izuku says anxiously as he strokes his hair. A kid used his quirk on me the other day after he lost to me in a spar. He apologized, but it was so easy for him to take control me and there wasn't a thing I could do about it. And when Kachan grabbed me in the cafeteria today, all I could do was cower while my friends came to my rescue, again. I became the same pathetic weakling I was in middle school, the kind of person I thought I'd stopped being. His eyes are wet, which only makes the situation worse, doesn't it? When things get hard, he can always be counted on to cry. But when someone screamed at heroes, they didn't cry or freeze. They were not oddball failures who required constant rescues. Izuku's sniffles and hiccups are the only sounds during an awkward minute or two as he tries to push his tears and insecurities back inside. I just can't stop thinking about, no matter how hard I try, that for all my effort, all I'll ever be is the quirkless Deku. Once Izuku has regained his composure, Rikamaru Shisho whispers, you probably saved his life, you know, after a minute. The damn news outlets wouldn't cover it because they're too far stuck up in their own asses to recognize true heroism when they see it. Izuku raises his eyebrows. I'm talking about the sludge incident, kid. That's all right. You came to see me for the first time about a week or two after, but the news was still running it. I recognized you right away. I didn't do anything really, all I could do was throw my backpack at the monster and try to pull Kachan out. If All Might hadn't shown up we both would have died, Izuku says, shifting his focus. I'm not saying it wasn't stupid as hell, but do you know what it also was? Brave. Not another damn person there was willing to help, even the so-called heroes were just standing by watching. I have nothing but respect for the number one, but he showed up late too. Who knows what would have happened if you hadn't been there to serve as a distraction, to give that kid a lungful of air. Shisho tightens his hold on Izuku's shoulders and leans in until they are almost eye to eye. That kid, who's given you hell for most of your life, and you didn't even need to think about running forward to help him. I don't know about you, but that's possibly one of the most heroic things I've ever heard of. But, so a punk with a fancy quirk got the better of you, use that big brain of yours and learn how counter it so it doesn't happen again. And don't you listen to another word that bully of yours says. Because anyone that hurts another to prove himself strong is no hero, and a man who refuses to acknowledge when another saves his life can hardly be called a man. So you keep pushing Midoriya, you keep training and studying to be a hero, because it would be a damn shame for that good heart of yours to go to waste. Izuku is silent because he lacks the words to express his current emotions. The primary one he can recognize is relief, as if a burden he had been bearing for the past few days had suddenly lifted. He is about to thank his master when he gets a hard blow to the head instead. How many times do we have to go through this, kid? Don't make me have to tell you this again. Now get on home to your mother before I make you run through another set. Izuku remarks casually, I thought I was overworking myself, and then quickly comes to regret it. He attributes it to his bone-deep fatigue and the 2 energy drinks he consumed to stay awake on the way. Another gentle slap on the back of his head is his reward. You're right. Don't do anything more strenuous than light stretching for 2 days, or I'll really show you what it means to be overworked, to make sure you don't ever do that again. I have your mother's phone number, don't test me. Izuku murmurs, yes Shisho, but is then struck in the head a 3rd time. At this rate, he was going to suffer brain damage. I didn't quite hear that. What are you not going to do again? Izuku straightens his back and says, yes Shisho, I won't overwork myself and try to train more than I'm supposed to. Shisho looks down on him for a moment longer before saying, and you're also not going to listen to anyone who tries to tell you what you are and are not capable of. Now get out of here, and so help me if I find out you didn't laze away for 2 days, you'll be in for it. Izuku, wincing with every muscle contraction, stoops to pick up his bag and says, I don't think that will be a problem, sir, I don't think I'll be moving again once I sit down. The only reaction he receives is a bark of laughter, but Izuku is familiar enough with his master to understand that this is meaningless. Since he honestly doesn't think he'll be able to get up again if he sits, he chooses to stand on the train during the lengthy journey home. Pushing open the door, Izuku plods up the stairs to his apartment. Izuku says, I'm home, Mom, as he enters and nearly collapses on the couch. I never want to move again. Mom pats his head and says, hi honey, I see your session went well, as she rushes by. Care to explain why I got a call explaining that you're not to exercise until at least Sunday or face consequences? Izuku murmurs, not really, into the throw pillow that his face was compressed into. She hums as she rests lightly on the couch's arm. Are you okay, sweetie? You've been kind of down the last few days, I've been worried. I thought you were happy at this school. Izuku groans and rolls over, looking up at his mother after saying, I am, into the pillow. She smiles and leans in to kiss his forehead, saying, I just had to get through some stuff, I'm better now, really. Rikamaru Shisho helped me set things straight in my head. Izuku's eyes follow her retreat as he thinks, I'm glad Izuku, I'd be happier if you showered before passing out on the couch, but I'll take what I can get. You rest up, I'll be starting dinner soon. At UA, he is content. He is content with his schoolwork, his friends, and his general education experience. Even though it doesn't seem like much at the moment, he is aware that he is preparing for something big. The fact that Izuku has yet to see All Might, even though it is already Friday of the first week, is beginning to drive him a little crazy. Since he couldn't train until Sunday, he decided to try early in the morning after he was obviously failing to find the man after school. Izuku hid close to the teacher's lounge for nearly 45 minutes in the hopes of catching a glimpse of All Might. He saw Present Mike talking loudly to a man wearing a scarf who appeared to be exhausted, but the number one was nowhere to be seen. Midnight briefly entered and exited, and he even caught a glimpse of ectoplasm. However, All Might is still absent. Before someone notices Izuku stalking and takes out his hero notebook, which is now up to volume 14, and cynically examines his updated All Might page, he leaves the teacher's area. Before slamming the book shut, he uses his pencil to underline, elusive, twice. He still has 30 minutes before homeroom begins, and he wants to add a few things to his notebook about the professionals he observed today. Izuku mutters to himself that Midnight was taller than she appeared on TV and makes a mental note to look up that unkempt man he'd seen with Present Mike as he memorizes his memories of the hallways. Was he another expert? Some deep-seated survival instinct has Izuku halting and leaning around the corner near his classroom, even though he is deep in thought. Izuku looks around and notices a boy with purple hair that defies gravity surrounded by a couple of older children. Izuku feels a little uneasy just looking at Shinso, and he almost thinks about leaving until Shinso turns slightly and Izuku notices that he appears unhappy. Before he has a chance to consider it, Izuku is charged ahead. Izuku separates the group and stands in front of Shinso, who appears equally as shocked as he is, saying, "Hey, leave him alone," before he can change his mind. Izuku would like to restrain his foolish inclinations for once. One of the older children jokes, "Oh look, the villain kid has a partner in crime," as he looks down at him. The villain's child. Izuku turns to face Shinso, who has a gloomy expression on his face as he glares at his shoes. "Better watch your step, brat. Don't you know the only reason they let him into UA is so the heroes could keep an eye on him?" Izuku, a little unsure, interrupts, "That's not true, but these guys are nothing in comparison to Kachin. If anything, they accepted him because he's smart and he's got an amazing quirk that will save a lot of people." He moves in the right direction. One of the boys flinches, and another casts a nervous look at their leader. Shinso hasn't done anything wrong and aren't the real villains the ones who bully other people for no reason. The boy then stalks off, his two friends following awkwardly behind him. "I don't know who you think he is, but he sure isn't a hero. I'll leave you to figure that one out on your own." "Come on guys, I don't want to catch his naivety." Izuku frowns as he watches them leave. Bullies exist everywhere, even at a prominent institution like UA. Izuku turns to face Shinso and asks, "Are you Oka?" but receives a slight shove that pushes him back a few paces. Shinso's fists are trembling a little, and his face is still lowered to the ground. Shinso demands in a tight, irate voice, "I didn't ask for your help. Who the hell are you to interfere in my business?" Izuku says, "I'm sorry, I was just trying to help," his confidence gone with a nearly noticeable pop as he attempts to correct whatever went wrong. "Those guys had no right to speak to you that way." "Oh yeah, and what do you know? You don't know anything about me," Shinso mutters. Izuku says softly, "I know you want to be a hero." Shinso appears to pause for a second before continuing, saying, "You mentioned it on the first day of school. You're right, I don't know much about you, but that alone tells me that you'd never be a villain." Shinso stuffs his hands into his pockets and walks away, saying, "You really don't know anything, just leave me alone." Izuku rubs his head and releases the breath he had been holding. Why does he say the wrong thing around this child every time? Though he is unsure of what to do, he can't help but feel some sympathy for Shinso. Izuku can see that the other boy is in pain, despite his hostile and aloof demeanor. He questions whether Shinso would allow him to assist and if there is anything he can do. Izuku writes in his hero notebook during the time before homeroom, but he finds it difficult to focus on the words. Rather, he recalls how resigned Shinso appeared prior to Izuku's intervention. As if he had come to terms with the fact that no one else thought his quirk could make him a hero. It was depressing in a way that Izuku, who had spent the majority of his life in the same circumstance, fully understood. Izuku would likely have become like Shinso if he had allowed his resentment and rage to control him. He felt compelled to assist his classmate. He hears a faint tap on his hand as he turns to face Shinso. He raises his gaze to Moton's vacant gaze. Moton whispers, "I see you had another run-in with our class's most mysterious member, probably to keep the others from hearing." She uses her quirk to look into his past, saying, "Sorry, I didn't mean to pry," as if the invasion of his privacy wasn't that serious. "You just looked deep in thought and I thought I'd see what I could do." "Yeah," Izuku hums in response, unsure of how to react to the unreasonable interference. Even though the majority of his classmates were kind, Izuku occasionally became annoyed by their casual, typically unwanted, quirks. However, he had been considering his options regarding Shinso. Perhaps she could assist Motome, who aspired to become a detective in the future. I just don't know what to do about Shinso. You know that we've had some bad encounters, but he doesn't really seem like a mean person. I wish there was something I could do to make him feel more comfortable, but I don't know how to go about it. Izuku elaborates as he loses himself in his thoughts. He murmurs to himself, perhaps if I just went straight to him and told him that I don't care about what happened in the past. But I also don't want him to think he can just walk all over me. He doesn't seem to have any other people he talks to. Maybe he just doesn't want to talk to anyone, until Motome knocks on his desk quietly and smiles amusedly. She remarks adoringly, "You're quite a character, Midoriya, you just don't stop, do you?" Izuku raises his hand to greet Kurudo and Taketsu as they enter, asking, "Stop what?" "Helping people," adds Motome. "I don't know what you should do. All I know is that there are rumors going around about him, mostly related to his brainwashing quirk. Honestly, those rumors don't seem to match up what I've seen from him. Jerk he may be, but I haven't seen him really do anything other than keep to himself." Motome pushes herself away from his desk as Kurudo and Taketsu approach. "It's up to you what you do, though. Just be careful and keep yourself out of trouble, you hear? Don't make us worry any more than we already do." Izuku said, "I will," unable to control his eye roll. He would have simply punched his old friend in the face if he had known that his altercation with Kacchan would result in everyone praising him. He finds it annoying that everyone feels the need to step in and change his life. In relation to which, and Motome. As she walks over to her seat, she looks back at him. As if to be impolite, Izuku murmurs, "I don't really have anything to hide, but maybe ask next time before using your quirk." However, Motome appears somewhat embarrassed rather than irate. She smiles and quickly sits back down as Chiura-sensei walks in. "Right, sorry about that, I kind of have a habit of poking my nose where it doesn't belong. Let me know if I go too far again, okay?" she asks. Chiura-sensei puts down his bag and declares, "All right, in your seats, homeroom has now begun." Before reviewing the daily announcements, he looks sternly and says, "I hope you're getting settled and preparing yourself, because it will only get tougher as the term continues." Izuku lets out a small sigh and allows himself to be slightly sidetracked as he looks over his shoulder to where Shinso was seated. Izuku is curious about the quiet, resentful boy who aspired to be a hero, and he wants to know how the other boy is doing following his bullying incident. He squeaks as his gaze lands on Shinso and quickly straightens out when he notices the other boy is staring at him with an open glare. Izuku wriggles in his chair a little, relieved that homeroom is over so he can relax. Ultimately, he fails to understand. The purple-haired boy would continue to stare him down every time he dared to turn around and check during the remainder of the morning. As the first, second, third, and fourth periods passed, Izuku felt as though he would explode with anxiety and discomfort. He continued to wave Kurudo and Kiyoshi away as they mouthed to check on him. Izuku knows that he simply doesn't want to turn to face them and catch a glimpse of Shinso's piercing gaze again, but he tells himself that he does it to avoid bringing them into another situation. Izuku is thinking about going to Recovery Girl for a note so he can excuse himself home by the time lunchtime arrives. He feels ill, that much is certain. Throughout lunch, he keeps sidestepping questions and shifting the subject while rubbing his forehead. Even though he hasn't done anything wrong, he already has people chasing him after the first week. He pauses with his chopsticks halfway to his mouth as the thought grabs him like a hangnail on an old shirt. He hasn't done anything to merit this, that's correct. He has only tried his hardest to blend in and pursue his goal. Does that imply that he is deserving of ridicule? To have nasty messages left on his desk? To get a glare? His anger rises like a gasoline-soaked campfire, and he frowns as his anxiety transforms into rage. Before the brown-haired boy looks at his face, Patrick teases, "Yo, are you gonna finish that or are you gonna leave your rice hanging?" Izuku is unsure of his exact expression, but based on Patrick's response, it must be negative. "Whoa man, you okay? You look like you need to deck someone. I personally volunteer Komodo because that guy is a jerk. Also he doesn't realize the pompadour went out of style like 50 years ago." Izuku says, "I'm fine," although his voice does not sound fine to him. With a grimace-like smile, he clears his throat and tries again. He looks around for Shinso and finds him sitting alone in his usual spot on the cafeteria's outer edges. "It'll be all right. There's just something I just realized I need to take care of. Excuse me. Motome frowns disapprovingly and says, be careful, obviously observing his intended destination. Korudo simply smiles and gives him the thumbs up. Izuku nods, but he's not really listening as he puts his shoulders back and approaches Shinso. I don't know what's going on, but you have my support. You know where we are if you need any backup. His frustration at not being able to enjoy his high school experience in peace seems to outweigh all of his anger and anxiety. He has dealt with it throughout elementary and middle school, and he will not allow it to follow him here. He has changed. Izuku approaches the table and towers over the other boy, who gives him a displeased look. Shinso mutters, I thought I told you to stay out of my way, while he continues to eat his pudding. Izuku swallows and continues despite Shinso's droll look, which saps some of his confidence. Look, I don't know what your problem is, but I'm not going to let you treat me like this. Shinso scoffs and breaks eye contact to play with his pudding. Look, I'm sorry if I upset you earlier, but I don't regret stepping in when those other kids were giving you a hard time. You don't deserve to be treated that way, just like I don't deserve everything that happens to me because I'm quirkless. Is that what you think this is about? Shinso asks dutifully, and Izuku's anger is rekindled by the dismissiveness of the statement. He slams a hand down on the table, startling Shinso enough to look up again. I have no idea what this is about because you won't tell me, Izuku mutters. Maybe if you had an actual conversation with me, we could work things out so you can find better things to do than glare at the back of my head for 4 hours straight. Shinso turns away and glares into his pudding. Okay, you want to talk? Let's talk. Meet me in the gym on the west side of campus after school, wear your gym uniform, and don't bring your little group. Sensei ended our spar early the other day, we'll get this settled once and for all. Izuku says, I'll be there, and nods. The afternoon goes by so much faster than the morning, it's incredible. He initially believes that the itching under his skin during those final few classes is the return of his anxiety, but he later realizes that it is actually akin to the sensation he gets prior to a training session with Rikamaru Shisho. As he watches the clock and considers what lies ahead, his leg jiggles nervously beneath his desk. He mutters softly to himself as he counts down the hours, considering what he will say and do. He never glances over his shoulder to check if Shinso is still glaring. Soon enough, whatever is going on between them will be resolved. The second half of the day goes by like a bullet if the first half seemed to go on forever. When the last bell rang, Izuku wasn't sure if he was relieved or queasy. In any case, it was best to finish this since he couldn't back out at this point. He readily excuses himself from his friends by saying that he needed to get in more training. At least they're letting him handle it alone, but it's too much for him to hope they'd forgotten about it sooner. They most likely believe he will simply speak with Shinso rather than engage in combat. Izuku didn't teach them because they could be very protective. Izuku gets into his gym uniform and warms up for a little while in the locker room. Although he lacks all might, his muscles have developed a level of strength that wasn't present at this time last year. He believes that his rapid progress will be sufficient for whatever Shinso has in store for him. It must be. 20 minutes after the last bell, he walks into the empty gym to see his opponent using a punching bag for exercise. Izuku is unable to control his wince. In addition to working without gloves or appropriate wrapping, the other boy's punching bag is much too heavy for a novice. Between punches, Izuku notices some blood and bruises on his knuckles. Rolling his shoulders, Shinso says, I wasn't sure you were going to show, and turns to leave the punching bag. He appears to be as worn out and irritated as he was before. I told you I would, answers Izuku. I don't want a repeat of our spar on Tuesday. I just want to work out whatever issues you have with me so that we can have a better relationship. We both want to be heroes, right? We should be working together, not against each other. Shinso snaps, you're so naive, out loud. That's exactly why we can't be friends. Now get on over to the mat and we'll see once and for all who the better hero is going to be. Even as he enters the mat across from the purple-haired boy, Izuku says, this is stupid, you're not an experienced fighter and I can't get around your quirk. Can't we try talking this time? Shinso, please, I want to help you. You always look so angry, but I think that you're really just lonely. I know because I've been in the same position. Shinso charges forward, his hands reaching out to tackle him, saying, stop acting like you know me. Izuku easily sidesteps the attack and fights the impulse to strike first. Come on, you're not an idiot. You know why I called you here, so fight me. I know you can since you insisted on humiliating me in gym the other day. Izuku hisses, I wasn't trying to humiliate you. Shinso gets close enough to give him a quick punch to the shoulder, knocking him off balance. As he straightens up and rushes forward to seize Shinso's wrist and wrench it behind his back, Izuku asks, why won't you talk to me? What could I have possibly done to make you so angry with me? Shinso asks, you really want to know? As he writhes in his grip until he presses his foot against Izuku's, causing him to swore and release the other boy. Shinso practically screams, his voice full of anger but his face looking so sad. I've had to fight every step of the way to get here. I've had to endure teachers and classmates and even my own family telling me I can't be a hero with my quirk. Do you know what that's like to be shot down no matter how hard you try? He says. He stops long enough to hurl a clumsy swing at Izuku, which Izuku narrowly avoids. When I got accepted to UA, I thought that maybe I could do this. I could prove myself and transfer into the hero department and get everyone to stop whispering behind my back every day. And then I get here and I find my main competition is this smiley idiot who acts like he can just walk on into the hero program without a quirk. Do you know how infuriating that is? Even when I think my dream is within reach, I get it tugged away by someone who can't possibly know what I've been through. Observing Shinso's increasingly unpredictable attacks, Izuku responds, that's so stupid. You don't think I know what it's like to have your dream mocked? With a mixture of annoyance and pity for the other boy, Shinso tries to grab him, but Izuku bats away his hands. I know how much that hurts. I lived with that hurt every day until I decided that I was done letting other people tell me what to do. I've been bullied and teased since the day I was diagnosed and I know how much that hurts. You're taking your frustration out on the wrong person, Shinso. I'm not the one holding you back, you are. You're so determined to be angry at the people who've beaten you down that you don't see that their opinions don't matter. I worked hard to get to this point. What have you done besides be angry at the things you can't change? Izuku ducks under a punch and swiftly grabs away from Shinso's feet. As he strikes the mat, Shinso appears taken aback. You say you want to be a hero but I don't see you doing anything about it. Train your body, improve your quirk and stop blaming other people for your problems. Izuku says with frustration. I'm not blaming anyone, sneers Shinso. Izuku demands, disregarding the statement's hypocrisy, then stand up and move forward. Do you want to be a hero because you want to prove everyone wrong? Or do you want to save people? Shinso yells angrily, I want to save people, and then appears to relax. Of course I do. Izuku begins to respond, then stop being so, but a foggy fog covers his thoughts. When he squats, his muscles lock in place and his brain slows to a crawl. Oh no, he was once more subjected to Shinso's brainwashing prank. How did it get activated? Could it be undone? Izuku finds that he is unable to move or do anything. Shinso crawls back to his knees and then to his feet after rolling onto his stomach on the ground. Still motionless in his spot close to the ground, he observes Izuku for a moment. That looks uncomfortable. Stand up, Izuku said, and he was suddenly upright, though not by his own strength. It was an extremely upsetting sensation. Izuku inhales deeply as he feels control return to him. You're more than an idiot, you're absolutely crazy. You know what I can do with my quirk but you didn't even hesitate to stand up for me today, didn't avoid meeting me here. I still don't know what to do with you. I thought this would help but now I'm even more confused. Izuku replies, you could stop being a jerk and be my friend, and Shinso is inspired to continue by the expression of utter surprise on his face. We got off to a rough start but I'd like to try again. You can sit with us at lunch. The others might give you a hard time at first but they'll warm up quickly I'm sure. I can give you some tips on fighting techniques and you can show me how your quirk works. I just took control of your body against your will, says Shinso softly, but with a level of emotion that Izuku is unable to identify. I could have made you do something terrible, had you bend your fingers back until they broke or forced you jump off the roof. Izuku calmly responds, no, you wouldn't, as he somehow understands. Based on those around him, he understands what it's like to be trapped in a negative frame of mind. And Shinso can escape if he can claw his way out. You're not a villain just like I'm not as useless as everyone says. Shinso says softly, you don't know me, with a very confused expression. You're right, but I'd like to get to know you better, Izuku says with a grin. Shinso looks surprised as he laughs, as if Izuku had shocked him. So can we be friends now? Stop fighting each other and start fighting this terrible, corrupt system that made us feel this way in the first place? He asks. He gives Izuku a few more moments of his wide purple eyes before averting his gaze and stumbling away. Shinso mutters, "I'll think about it," as he heads for the exit with his hands stuffed deep in his pockets. Thinking that this is the second, no, third, time that Shinso has abandoned him, Izuku smiles wryly. Well, Rome wasn't created overnight. Izuku looks up and says, "Hey," noticing Shinso standing close to the door. "Are you coming or are you going to sleep here?" Izuku practically skipped over to where the other boy was holding open the door after yelling, "Oh oh. Yes, I'm coming, here, let me get my bag," and grabbing his backpack. He chirps, "Thanks," which only makes Shinso appear more uneasy. As they move down the hall, Izuku waves Shinso away as he murmurs, "I guess I am sorry for taking over your mind earlier and yelling at you, punching you too. I haven't really treated you fairly since school started, have I? It's fine, this is new for both of us. I'm sorry for sending you to the mat. My master has put me through that enough times that I know it had to hurt. I can show you how to fall properly or even how to avoid an attack like that in the first place. Your quirk is handy but you'll need some combat skills if you want to transfer." Shinso scoffs, "You really are crazy, Midoriya," but he has a tiny smile on his face, and to Izuku, it marks the beginning of something new. Izuku enters the room as Inko is nervously stirring the noodles in the pot. With a brief sigh of relief, she turns to use her spoon to reprimand her son. Inko demands, "Izuku, where have you been? You told me you were going to be home early today and, look, it's almost 5. You better not have been out there training." Izuku interrupts, taking off his jacket and settling down at the kitchen chairs, but Inko isn't finished yet. "Mom, I wasn't, I promise," he says. She looks at him. There is a hint of guilt on his face, but not much. "Because I have your martial arts teacher's phone number and he said to call if you'd been exercising during your little break. He had been involved in something, but after practice, he doesn't appear to be the same person he usually is. I know you want to be more independent, but if you say you're going to come home at a certain time, I expect you home at that time. Or at least phone me if you're going to be late." You have no idea how worried I was. Even though her son is 15 and enrolled in a renowned high school, he is not yet fully grown up. She still has to worry about him. She is unable to contain her anger as he frowns up at her with large green eyes. "I'm sorry, Mom, it's been such a crazy day, a crazy week. Something happened after school today and I lost track of time. I promise I'll call home next time." "Well, can you at least tell me what it was?" she asks, turning down the stove's heat and returning to her cooking. "I know it's been a while, but your mom still remembers how scary the first week of high school can be." As she turns back to face him, Izuku pauses and says, "Maybe, it was, kind of unclear." He stammers, "It's kind of weird and I don't even know how to explain it, but I think I made another friend today." She is so happy that she could cry when Inko says, "Oh Izuku, that's wonderful, I'm so glad." It shouldn't be a huge deal for a boy to make a new friend, but for someone who has experienced as much rejection as Izuku, it's a blessing. At first, she wasn't sure about Yue, but it's obvious that her son has benefited greatly from it. "Tell me about them, are they nice? Do they know your other friends?" "Shinso is," Izuku says, pressing his chin against his folded arm across the table and pursed lips. "He's a bit like me, how I was before Yue. He wants to be a hero too, he got a great quirk but no one else can see it. Mom, you should have seen him today, he looked so sad. I tried to help and, I don't know, maybe I did a little, but I had to do something." She says, "Oh baby," and moves away from the stove to approach her son. "You're a good boy, I'm sure you did help your friend. Sometimes just having someone care is enough to make a difference. One small act of kindness can mean the world to someone." After a moment, Izuku whispers, "Yeah," behind her. "Hey Mom. Can I invite my friends over tomorrow? I sort of already invited Shinso, you know, so he knows I'm genuine in my offer to be friends. But Taiketsu, Patrick and Korudo and I talked about it earlier, but I was thinking maybe." He stands up. "I hope that's not too much. I know inviting 4 people over is a lot, but I promise we'd be good and keep the noise down and—" "Oh hush you," Inko says lovingly, interrupting her son before he becomes agitated. "I think that's a lovely idea. I've been wanting to meet your friends anyway. But don't worry, I'll keep out of the way and not embarrass you." Izuku is beaming at her. "Go on, you give them a call and change out of your uniform." We're having pasta tonight and I don't you to spill. Okay, I'll do that now, he exclaims, leaping from his chair with his typical vigor. He rushes over and kisses her on the cheek before he leaves to call his friends. He says, "Thanks mom. You're the best," and leaves with his cell phone out. As she finishes her dinner, Inko chuckles softly to herself at her son's antics. It's true that raising Izuku hasn't been easy, and she frequently questions whether she could have done more for her son. But some of those concerns go away when you see him now. Even though there have been a few setbacks, Inko undoubtedly raised a strong, compassionate boy. She hears him conversing in the adjacent room and smiles to herself. It's time for other kids to realize what a great boy her boy was. In Izuku's sitting room, Patrick sits cross-legged and cheerfully suggests, "We should play a board game." He is dressed in board shorts and an English-language t-shirt with vibrant colors that resemble an advertisement for a restaurant. "We are not playing a board game," Taiketsu says, reclining on the floor-mounted couch. She wears a loose white blouse and navy blue capris, and her black hair is pulled back in a tail. "I'd wipe the floor with all of you and Korudo would probably throw a fit." Shinso says softly, "I don't care either way," appearing a little uneasy since arriving wearing jeans and a basic t-shirt with a button-up shirt over it. Korudo glared at him, but he had mostly sat quietly to himself. Korudo breaks his glaring argument with Shinso to turn the tables on Taiketsu, who didn't seem to care. "I wouldn't lose," Korudo pouts. He sits on his knees next to Izuku, dressed in khaki pants and a cotton-collared shirt. Izuku tries to maintain harmony by saying, "I don't really have any board games anyway. It's been just me and mom for a while, so all we have are puzzles and a few video games." He wanted to present his friends in a positive light to his mother. If they all started fighting, she could still hear them even though she's in her room working at her sewing machine. It was actually his fault. He should have realized that having Shinso here would make his friends uncomfortable. Izuku says, "How about a movie? What does everyone like?" "Comedy," exclaims Patrick. "Romance," smiles Taiketsu. "Sci-fi," shrugs Shinso. "Action," nods Korudo. The five of them exchange glances before they all start laughing, including Shinso. They were all laughing despite the fact that it wasn't particularly funny. Izuku could grow accustomed to this kind of thing. It's a pleasant feeling. Taiketsu lets out a sigh and spreads her long legs when they stop talking. She looks around before deciding on Izuku. "Okay, so I guess a movie is out, maybe we can just talk. It's only a week into school, I feel like I hardly know you guys." Her eyes purposefully move to Shinso and back to him before saying, "Let's start with you, what made you invite us all over?" "Don't get me wrong, I'm having a great time, I'm just curious." Izuku responds, "I don't know, I thought it might be fun. Shinso and I talked yesterday at school and we realized that we had a lot in common, so I thought he might want to hang out with us. I was guilted into coming. Also, you promised you'd help me train, that's the only reason I'm here," Shinso grumbles. Patrick says, "Well, I'm glad you did," with a smile. Pulling Shinso close, he throws an arm over his shoulder and says, "My dad's out of town this week and next and it's so boring at the house all by myself. Plus I'm looking forward to getting to know this wild guy. I was surprised to hear Midoriya invited you, but I'm glad you've joined the group." Shinso appears extremely uneasy and breaks free of the grip. Korudo murmurs, "Even though he left you that terrible note on your desk." As the conversation ends, Taiketsu kicks him a little with her leg. Panicked, Izuku turns to face Shinso, who is giving Korudo a fierce glare. Izuku ought to have anticipated Korudo's protective nature. He acted too quickly. Perhaps he ought to have attempted to integrate them at school on an equal basis. As he turns to face Izuku, Shinso murmurs, "Let me say this once so everyone is aware." Izuku releases a knot in his chest that he was unaware had existed. "I didn't write you that note. I don't care that you're quirkless, you're annoying anyway." This makes it much better, even though he had already forgiven Shinso for the note. Korudo adamantly asserts, "But in the gym, Nakadai called out your lie when you tried to deny it." Shinso breaks the painful silence and says, "I said, why would you think I did that? That prick was right, it was a lie. Of course I knew why everyone thought that, but no one ever bothered to ask me if I actually did it. Look, I appreciate the invite, Midoriya, but maybe this was a bad idea. I'll see you Monday." Korudo says, "No wait," before Izuku can respond. Shinso frowns and gently places himself back on the floor. "You're right, I judged you without getting to know you and I'm sorry for that. However, You're Midoriya's guest, just like us. Please sit down, I'd like to start over, if we can. As if nothing had happened, Kurudo turns to Patrick and sighs. I can't believe your parents let you stay alone for 2 weeks, he says. I would love to have the house to myself, but at least one of my parents is home at all times. Taiketsu, who was biting her fingernail, said, what about your mom, Patrick? I must admit I'm a little curious about her. You mentioned the first day that you moved to Japan because of your dad, so I'm assuming your mother is American. She was, Patrick says with another faint, melancholy smile. He shrugs half-heartedly and leans forward, looking at the floor. She died 4 years ago. Ovarian cancer. It got diagnosed late and by then there wasn't much they could do. My folks split up a long time ago, too dedicated to their work to pick up and move halfway across the world. I hardly ever saw my dad until she died, then I was shipped off to Japan to live with him. As she leans forward to place a hand on Patrick's shoulder, Taiketsu says, oh Patrick, I'm so sorry, her heart in her eyes. I didn't mean to bring up bad memories, we can change the subject. Nah, it's okay, it's been a couple of years and besides, if I don't talk about her then she really is gone. Patrick's expression softened. We lived in San Francisco, it's this big city in California. She ran a restaurant, about 2 or 3 blocks from the bay. Mom kept everyone in line and made sure the customers happy. She was always so spirited, tried to talk to everyone and ask how they were doing. Her enthusiasm for helping people is maybe why I kinda wanna be a hero. Kurudo mutters, she sounds like a great mother, I'm sure you miss her a lot. Patrick nods, yeah, and then his smile returns. But Dad and I are getting along fine. His job has him traveling a lot but I can tell he's trying. It's not perfect but we're getting there. I'm sorry, Shinso murmurs. I lost my parents when I was young. Just because it was years ago doesn't make it hurt any less. I'm glad to hear you and your father are getting along. My uncle doesn't really want to deal with me. He smiles timidly at Patrick, but you know she still lives on in you. As long as you remember her, she's not completely gone. Patrick whispers, yeah, I know man, thanks, and gives Shinso a one-armed shoulder hug. Shinso appears much more at ease this time than when Patrick touched him the first time. The next minute or so is spent in peaceful, friendly silence between the 5 of them. Izuku tries to bring up the topic by asking, so what's it like in America, do you miss it? Yeah, I miss it every day. I mean I spent the first decade of my life there so it's kind of hard not to. But Japan is great, it's different but it's got this energy about it that I love. Plus you guys have, like, the best heroes. Patrick breathes a sigh of relief, but man it was rough when I first got here. Tokyo is nothing like San Fran plus I couldn't speak the language at all. It took me like, a month, just to figure out how to ask where the bathroom was. That caused them all to laugh, which lightened the mood. Izuku suspects the other boy did that on purpose, so he casts a sidelong glance at Patrick. Even though he can be noisy and a little too eager, he has always been sensitive to other people. Izuku thought it was one of his best traits. Patrick pounded his leg like a drum, saying, all right, now that I've unloaded my tragic backstory, let's hear from. Quote, our beautiful and talented assistant class representative, Akane Taiketsu, tell me more about your badass quirk and why you didn't apply for the hero course. That pro-hero, Blood King, has the same ability. No offense to anyone here but she's probably got the best shot. She was so cool the other day, threatening that jerk with her blood spears. Patrick responds, reenacting Taiketsu's. Shinso repositions himself to sit more comfortably and adds, I couldn't see much of what happened but it did seem very impressive, I'd like to hear more as well. Taiketsu murmurs, stop it guys, but her cheeks are flushed. She pauses to bite the skin on her thumb, causing a tiny dot of blood to appear, and then says, honestly, it looks a lot more impressive than it is. Blood King has a much more stable version of the quirk than I do. She takes out a tiny stream with her other hand and plays with it idly in the air, spinning it around and creating tiny shapes. Blood makes up about 7% of your body weight, so I have between 4.5 and 5.5 liters of blood depending on water weight. That may seem like a lot but you actually need that blood to survive and, unlike Blood King, I can't reuse any blood I take out. The more blood I use, the more likely I am to go into shock. It was almost hypnotizing to watch her twist and form the tiny droplets of red. Patrick reaches out to touch it and asks, so what's the upper limit you can use? Taiketsu pulls it away and starts to tease him with it. When you donate blood you typically give about half a liter, it's about that point you might start to feel dizzy and a bit weak. That's probably about how much I lost when we dealt with that awful hero kid in the cafeteria, but that's pretty easy to recover from. Anything more than 1.52 liters requires a blood transfusion. Korudo remarks grimly, that doesn't sound safe, not just from the blood loss but also the risk of infection and, no offense, but the buildup of scar tissue as well, gesturing to Taiketsu's hands. Although Izuku has seen a few of them before, he can now clearly see that her palms are covered in both small and large scars. He could see one big one across her left wrist, the sleeves of her blouse bunched up a bit. She covers the mark with her arm, as though sensing his gaze. You've mentioned that you're considering hero work too. I don't want to be discouraging but, I'm a bit worried, Korudo says. Under her breath, Taiketsu says, you and me both, almost to herself. When I was little, I wanted to be just like the heroes on TV, strong and confident and capable of saving people. But I got a reality check and realized that I'd have to be crazy to keep trying. She looks shyly at Izuku. You got me inspired again, Midoriya. You're more disadvantaged than all of us but here you are, still actively working towards your goal. It made me want to try again. When Izuku says, I believe in you, Taiketsu, he smiles. You were so amazing standing up to Kachan the other day. I think you have the strength to be a hero, you just need to know how to make your quirk work for you. Korudo frowns and says, I still think it's too dangerous, but Patrick shoves him aside. Patrick gives Taiketsu the thumbs up despite Korudo's desperate denials, saying, life is dangerous Korudo, you're just upset cause you're totally freaked out by blood. I think you should go for it. You'll never know if you can do it if you don't try. Have you thought of your hero name yet? You should be something like AA. Patrick's face lights up with thought. He holds his index finger in front of his mouth like fangs and asks, crap, how do you say vampire again? When Taiketsu and Izuku saw Patrick's impression, they started laughing. In between giggles, Taiketsu contradicts herself by putting the blood drop she had been playing with in her mouth. I am not a vampire, she says. She gets up to refill her glass from the pitcher on the counter and says, Ik iron, I need some more lemonade. Be right back. What about you Shinso? I don't know much about your quirk. It's pretty simple. I can brainwash anyone who answers me into doing just about anything, Shinso maintains. The only drawback that I've been able to find is that using my quirk for any length tires me out. Izuku murmurs to himself, ah, that makes sense, recalling how he had been ensnared in Shinso's influence both times right after responding to the boy. A light thunk of glass on his head stops him from thinking. Is there a limit to how many people you can control at once? How long are you able to control them? What can you make them do? Depending on your limitations, that could be an invaluable quirk for hero work as you can de-escalate fights just by getting the villain to respond to. Taiketsu sits back on the ground with her refilled glass and says, don't mind him, he's always like that, rolling her eyes affectionately. Please continue, Shinso, this is very interesting. I've wanted to be a hero for as long as I can remember, there was something about seeing those people saving lives that made me want to do the same. Shinso starts out slowly, I don't quite know the full extent of my powers yet. I really don't use it all that much because it scares people, makes them afraid to talk to me. He stops and examines his hands. I know I can do bad things with this kind of quirk and it's easy and tempting to make people do what I want. But I'm trying to do this right, I want to use this power to help people and make a difference. I took entrance exam for heroics but that really isn't set up for quirks like mine. I figured I could use the sports festival to get the right people's attention and move forward with my goal. Yeah, that exam was ridiculous, Korudo said, his eyes displaying understanding. I took it too but thermoregulation is about as useful at destroying robots as brainwashing. I can see how your quirk can be useful but you'll need to be a little more physical training if you really want to make an impression. Shinso turns to Izuku with a contemplative, slightly sly expression. Yeah, I know, I've been training on my own a bit but Midoriya gave me an earful the other day about my techniques so he said he was gonna show me a few things. Since we're asking questions, what drives a quirkless kid to shoot for the best hero program in the country? Izuku tries to come up with a more interesting explanation than, I became obsessed with trying to be a great hero like All Might, by saying weakly, oh it's really not that interesting. With the abundance of hero merchandise, there's a reason they weren't in his room but rather out here in the living room. Patrick beams and leans forward, listening. Come on man, this is prime comic book material. The shy, Powerless kid fights against the odds and becomes a superhero, he says. You mentioned you're a fan of All Might, but like, who isn't? Why yeah, stutters Izuku. He looks down at his hands and smiles shyly, saying, I just liked how amazing he was, how he could smile in the face of anything to put the people he's saving at ease. That's the kind of hero I want to be. I know I can't do a lot, but I figured the world could use a hero who could do the little things. Also, I want to change the way the hero industry is shaped. Maybe if people see a quirkless hero out there, I can stop some of the discrimination. That's a good dream, Taketsu remarks positively. I think the world could use a few more heroes like you. I bet All Might himself would be proud to work alongside you, she says with an infectious grin. Izuku's mind shuts down a bit, not only because of the wildly extravagant compliment, but also because he occasionally forgets that Taketsu is a girl, a very attractive one, and other times it just hits him in the face, making him uncomfortable and overly conscious. Izuku responds wisely, Biwa, and resolves to give it another go. Thanks, he finally squeaks out after clearing his throat for a few seconds. It truly is motivating, Korudo remarks from beside him. My parents are always breathing down my neck to join the family business. In a way, part of my desire to be a hero is to break out of that mold they're trying to put me in. He beams and glances at Izuku, but your selflessness and your desire to help people, even people like that 1A bully, really shows how great a difference there is between us. Even without a quirk, you've got your brain and martial arts, and I can very slowly alter my body temperature. Izuku says sincerely, hey, I think you've got a great quirk, since every quirk is wonderful in its own unique way. I think there's a lot of things you could do with it. You'd be great as a rescue hero like 13. Leaning forward, Patrick exclaims, Midori is right. Yeah, we give you grief for it, but it's a pretty versatile quirk. I personally think you'd be good in a kitchen, you'd be a one-man refrigerator and heater. I'm not going to be a chef, Korudo declares, his brow set stubbornly. I need to find my own path, whether it's heroics or elsewhere. Taketsu smiles softly before it becomes piercing. And we'll be here to support you along the way, she says. As Korudo tries to hide his smile with a pout, Patrick, predictably, bursts into laughter. If all else fails, you and Patrick could always go into business together to serve as part-time utilities, a thermostat, and a light bulb. Korudo lets out a dramatic sigh and asks, why do I put up with you again? Because we give you the pushback you need in order to better yourself and to teach you how to react to friendly teasing. Says Taketsu. What? Exclaims Patrick. He goes on, I thought we only liked him for his body, while glaring at Korudo. Korudo scoots as far away from Patrick as he can while wearing a vaguely horrified expression. Oh relax, I'm just messing with you. You need to learn to chill. Korudo sighs, which naturally makes them all laugh once more. It's hard when I'm surrounded by a quirkless optimist, a mind controller, a girl who's probably going to bleed to death one of these days, and an American. For several more hours, they converse in this manner, covering everything from serious subjects to absurd ones and all points in between. Izuku couldn't recall ever feeling so at ease around people his own age. He can't recall the last time he laughed so hard that his stomach hurt. When they left, it was already dark, they had all eaten a delicious homemade dinner, and they were all feeling much happier and closer to one another than when they had first arrived. Each one of them was a mess, but when combined, they were a huge mess. While enjoying a half-cold cup of coffee in his apartment, Aizawa Shota is reflecting on his most recent class of first-year students. He's still debating what to do about a few issues that are bothering him. The number of children is one issue. This philosophy has now come back to haunt Shota, who is adamant about not accepting any students who haven't earned the right to be there. A total of 19 students, an ungainly, uncomfortable number. It subtly disrupts the dynamics of the entire class and makes planning activities difficult. He had considered removing one of the pupils to make things more equitable, and he had no qualms about it in the past. It wouldn't feel right, though, because even Mineta, the person he has most nearly expelled, has shown some promise. It naturally puts him back where he started. Another headache strikes Shota as he looks through some of the class profiles. From the beginning, Bakugo Katsuki has been a threat. He has witnessed it countless times. A child with a flamboyant eccentricity is told throughout their life that they are unique, only to discover how insignificant they were upon arriving in UA. Bakugo appears to be as interested in attempting to get along with his classmates as Shota was during the bi-weekly karaoke night, and he has performed violently and uncontrollably during class activities. The boy reportedly got into a fight with a few Gen Ed students in the cafeteria shortly after destroying a building on the second day of the battle trial. That afternoon, Shota had the expulsion form on his desk. He believed Bakugo was too unstable to train, but he secretly thought the boy needed direction rather than punishment. Ultimately, Shota has set a deadline for himself. Before they knew it, the sports festival would be here. Applications for transfers were submitted by the other departments, primarily Gen Ed but also occasionally business and support. Knowing that there was an open spot in 1A, the majority of the teachers would undoubtedly urge their bright students to shine at the festival. He would have an even 20 students if he found a child deserving enough to transfer over, and he would stop there. However, one of the current students would have to leave if no one in particular stood out. Given his lecherous tendencies, Mineta was the obvious choice, but if Bakugo kept up his disruptive influence, he might end up with nothing left but his pride. He notices that it's getting late after taking a quick look at the clock. Before starting his nightly routine, he needs to eat something. As he prepares for his patrol, he leaves the class profiles piled high on his work desk. Later, in addition to completing the preparations for the USJ field trip the following week, he will need to continue reviewing them and modifying the students' training. Shota sighs. He frequently questions why he bothers teaching because it can be a chore at times. Bakugo is reminded of why when he imagines himself becoming a powerful, revered hero in the future. Tsukauchi asks, "So, while munching on his pizza, how did it go?" Toshinori responds, "Fine, fine, it was just great," while slathering his pizza with more Parmesan cheese. Even when he requests more cheese, they never seem to put enough on. To avoid going into further detail about his friend's question, he lets himself be delightfully sidetracked by this pointless line of thought. The policeman gives Toshinori a look that indicates he is aware of the hero's plans and asks, "Great huh?" with a tone that is clearly sarcastic. Toshinori frowns, wondering why he would make friends with a detective. Innocently, the man blinks and returns to his pizza, saying, "Not a very warm introduction for the kid who might end up as your successor. Unless of course you don't think he's the right one." Toshinori sighs and puts down the cheese. No, it's not that. It's just," he says. Even though he believes he went a bit too far, he will never tell Tsukauchi that. He picks up his pizza, which is heaped with extra cheese, and says, "Tagata Mirio is a wonderful young man. He's brave, kind, and spirited and has this warm energy that makes other people happier to be around him. He'd truly be a worthy successor to One for All." Whispering, "I'm sensing a bit in there," Tsukauchi observes. It's likely that Toshinori's silent munching will be the only response the other man requires. "Look, I have nothing but respect for your former sidekick, but you can't let him bully you into a decision you don't feel comfortable with." Toshinori, "No, but that's the thing," interrupts. He clenches his fists and despises their weakness, saying, "I need a successor, Tsukauchi, and I need one sooner rather than later. I can just barely stay as All Might for 3 hours, and between that and now trying to teach, I can't. I just can't." Once capable of tearing down monsters and toppling mountains, these hands are now nothing more than regrets and skin and bones. He nearly embraces death every day, but he can't bring himself to tell one of his best friends that he feels that way. "Young Tagata is everything I could possibly want. I would be foolish to ignore his potential and all the good he could do with One for All. Night Eye is right, some perfect kid isn't going to come up to me and announce themselves. I need to stop being so particular and just decide." He shrugs, putting down his food because he is too upset to eat at this time. With his own pizza put down and his fingers folded across his knees, Tsukauchi asks, "Do you want to tell me how the meeting went? Maybe talking it out will help you sort what you're feeling." "It went fine," Toshinori exclaims as he runs his hand through his untidy hair. "Night Eye has the young man employed at his agency. I stopped by and pretended to be an old associate of his. Night Eye made his excuses and young Tagata and I spoke for almost 20 minutes before All Might got a call to stop that lizard villain in downtown Kyoto. We talked about his life, his time at UA, his work with Night Eye and his plans for the future." He lets out a sigh and covers his eyes, rubbing them tiredly. Tsukauchi gently coaches, "He seems like a good kid, so what is it?" In his friend's flat, Toshinori rests his back against the couch. He remembers Nana, who had rescued him from certain death. He reflects on the hardships and anguish he went through to earn her confidence. He remembers how alone he felt with a power he didn't understand, and how her body was broken after her final battle with All for One. Whispering to himself, It didn't feel real, Toshinori says. It felt like I was an actor in a play, walking through a part one hadn't rehearsed. Night Eye means well, he really does, but I don't think he understands that all of his analyzing and twisting of circumstance takes away something important. Tsukauchi says, I think I understand, but his tone suggests that he doesn't, at least not in the sense that Toshinori intends. So what are you going to do? I'm going to wait a little longer. I'll keep an eye on young Tagata, see if I can try and work past the phony feeling of our first meeting. There's also plenty of other students at UA worth looking at. I've had a few classes with some of the hero students and any one of them would be worthy, I'm sure. Tsukauchi leans forward a little, places his hand on the table, and looks into Toshinori's eyes. Okay, I trust you to know what is best for you and for your power. I'm just worried about you. All Might is really putting a strain on your health and I never thought UA was right for you in the first place. But I'm trusting you, he says. And I want you to trust me. Let all of us, help you. We'll find your successor, don't worry. Toshinori looks away from his friend and toward the open window. Yeah, I'll keep that in mind. Thanks Tsukauchi, he responds absently. Toshinori would eventually find that boy or girl, but the issue wouldn't be resolved tonight and most likely not tomorrow either. His gut, which was almost non-existent, told him that the one he was searching for was waiting outside. He has no idea how long it will take to locate them, but he is certain that he will recognize them right away. Izuku is slouched over his English assignment across town, muttering to himself while he sorts out the awkward wording. He sneezes once, twice, and 3 times into his sleeve as he considers texting Patrick for advice. To get rid of the lightheadedness, he shakes his head. Someone must be discussing him. He shrugs and returns to his work. By the end of the first week at UA, Midoriya Izuku's morning routine had become standardized. His alarm goes off at 4:30 a.m. every morning. Izuku was different from most teenagers, who wouldn't even consider willingly setting an alarm this early, much less getting up when it rang. Although he occasionally complains, he always gets out of bed quickly after. Despite the fact that classes have begun, he cannot afford to neglect his training. As a result, he faithfully starts his daily workout, which consists of a 25-minute run through his city to a nearby park where he can observe the sunrise while practicing his stances, flexibility, and even improvising some fighting moves before heading home. Naturally, though, there was no time for relaxation because he had to take a quick shower to look presentable. Usually, his mother is finishing her breakfast by the time he finishes. She would still be up every morning cooking, so his attempt to convince her that she didn't need to get up so early for him was in vain. After finishing that, he would have enough time to get his bag, bid his mother farewell, and dash to the train station in time for his ride. He always tries to catch the early train because the ride could be long or short depending on traffic or villain attacks. Since he no longer has the time to investigate attacks throughout the city, he typically passes the time by reading up on the most recent hero reports. Izuku likes to visualize how he would have fought in any particular attack in order to keep his mind active. He could arrive in UA roughly half an hour before classes began, assuming there were no delays. Izuku wanders around the beautiful grounds for a while or looks for any professional heroes, like All Might, who he hasn't yet seen. After that, he spends some time studying in his classroom until the other students arrive. Before homeroom, Izuku always makes time to talk to his friends. In other cases, if the train is late, he would have to dash to school, hoping to reach his classroom before Chiura-sensei arrives, racing past the gate and through the hallways. Before homeroom starts, he finds time to say a few words to his friends while he is panting from his run and slumped in his chair. As he trained, studied, and read up on the newest heroes and quirks, his days typically started before the sun rose and lasted until long after it had set. It was a demanding schedule that occasionally caught up with him and made him take a break, but overall, he faces the 4:30 a.m. alarm every day with a strong sense of resolve. Because sleeping in and wasting his free time playing around won't help him achieve his goal. Because of all the effort and passion he puts into everything he does, he will succeed. Pulling Izuku from his thoughts, Taiketsu asks Monday morning, "What do you think?" Shinso, Korudo, and Patrick are now off to the side, arguing about something. Don't mind them, they're just mad cause the hero kids get to go on some fancy field trip today while we're stuck in class. I personally don't care, so what's got you up in the clouds? She asks, putting her elbows on her desk. Izuku says softly, I'm thinking about weapons, before his mind re-emerges and he recognizes how awful that sounds. For training, if I'm going to be a quirkless hero, I'm going to need some tools to make up for my lack of quirk. My master spent a lot of time training me with a bow, but those are made of wood and won't stand up to the combative quirks. He sighs and reclines in his chair. Besides all that, I need to think about how I'm going to sell myself in the first place. The sports festival is 3 weeks away and I need to make an impression if I'm going to transfer. Taiketsu smiles and says, heavy stuff for a Monday, before her face furrows in focus. Sounds like you need to talk to people in business and support. I hear the support kids are always eager for projects to test their mettle, and people in business pretty much spends all day thinking about how to market heroes. Our first student council session was Friday and there were kids from all departments there. I can probably see what connections I can pull for you. Find anyone who's interested. With a smile on his face, Izuku tells Taiketsu, you're the nicest, most amazing person I have ever met, almost crying. That would be so helpful, you have no idea. I can pay you back this afternoon when we train. I have some moves I think will work well for you. Taiketsu flinches and asks, oh, right, is that today? Yeah, we talked about it on Saturday, remember? You were all for it then, she recalls. Yeah, but that was Saturday and this is today and, well, exercise just isn't my thing, she complains. That's why we've got to get better, cheerfully responds Izuku. Come on, you were talking about how you wanted to be a hero. A hero needs to be more than just their quirk. Besides, working out together is a fun way to keep in shape. Alright, I'll be there, Taiketsu declares, raising her hands in surrender. I'll get you in touch with some business and support people and you teach me how to do some sick ninja moves. Izuku starts out by explaining to one of their classmates, Fukuyo, it will take time to build up strength and technique, but I'm sure you'll can I help you. Fuyono appears next to them, with slate gray eyes, hair pulled back into a small tail, a feminine-looking face, and a bored expression. He is slightly taller than Izuku. Hey, sorry, I couldn't help over here, you needed someone in business. My twin sister is in that department and, believe me, she'd have a field day making you into a hero. I could introduce you to her if you're interested. Aneko could probably hook you up with someone in support, the child responds with a lazy droll. Oh, that'd be real helpful, Izuku says, flinching and rambling. He doesn't know the name of his own classmate, but he can memorize interviews with all might. Fukuyo Kyodai, I usually pal around with Komodo, Azumo and Inukai, so we haven't had a lot of opportunity to talk. Looks away. With a quick glance around, Fukuyo says, I think it's great you're going for heroics. My uncle is quirkless too and it sucks how people treat you guys. If me or Aneko can help, let me know. He then rushes back to his seat before anyone notices that he has been talking to the child oddly. Patrick murmurs, Pust Midoriya. Behind him, what was that all about? Taiketsu answers, networking, you wouldn't understand, and Patrick bursts out laughing even though there isn't a joke. Shinso appears somewhat perplexed, and Korudo appears irritated at being cut off in the middle of a tirade. The boy with the purple hair asks, are you guys always like this? Korudo murmurs, Yuji, welcome to my world, pass go and get your free headache, and by the time Chiora-sensei walks into the classroom, Patrick is still laughing. After morning classes end, Fukuyo sneaks up behind them in the hallway and says, Aneko says you can meet her for lunch. He appears anxious as he checks his surroundings to make sure none of his pals can see him. She says she'll be sitting near the back, by the windows. Don't worry about finding her, she'll find you, he says quickly. I hope she's able to help. She said she's got someone in mind from support who can get you whatever you need. Izuku smiles and says, thanks Fukuyo, I really appreciate it, why don't you sit with us, it would give us a chance to get to know you. When Fuyuko says, yeah, I'm going to have to pass, he winces. He waves his hand when Patrick opens his mouth to say, I don't have time to explain, ask Aneko. Komodo is expecting me and, besides, I never eat lunch with Aneko. Her thoughts drive me crazy, bad enough I have to live with her. Taiketsu sulks, I don't understand why you hang out with Komodo, he's such a jerk. Fuyuko shrugs, but even he doesn't seem particularly convinced. Yeah, but he's funny you know, and he's got this sort of magnetism about him. I don't know, he's not so bad when you get to know him. He checks his phone with a faint grimace as it buzzes. I gotta go, good luck with Aneko. Don't let her push you around too much. Shinso emerges from behind, looking bored, and asks, so did he tell us how to find this girl or did I miss out on that? What, you're not the only one who needs to think about marketing appeal. Yeah, and I know next to nothing about the business kids, it could be interesting, says Korudo. Where you go, we go, we're with you 100% man. Patrick smiles as he leans over Shinso and Korudo. The five of them then head into the cafeteria to look for their enigmatic business contact. Patrick, who is significantly taller than them all, tries to look around by standing on his toes. Fuyuko does know the entire school has lunch in here at once, right? There's no way we'll be able to find this girl in this crowd. Hey there, you must be Kyodai's friends. A cheerful girl exclaims as she approaches them. The girl in front of them appears to be an exact replica of Fuyuko, albeit with longer hair, and Izuku blinks in shock. He would claim the boy had just changed clothes if he didn't know any different. He glances down, then quickly looks back up at her face, blushing. She didn't even have a girl's figure. He would have assumed she was a boy if it weren't for her hair and skirt. As she flips her shoulder-length hair and gestures for them to follow, she says, nice to meet you, I'm Fuyuko Aneko, but you can call me Aneko since you're my little brother's friends, which practically makes you my friends. Come on, I've got a table and I am so ready to pick your brains. I've been needing a project to sink my teeth into. It's like someone gave Fuyuko a wig and a semblance of a personality, Korudo murmurs. Patrick says, that's not very nice, Korudo. I think Fuyuko would make a pretty girl, but he has to suppress a smile. But Shinso doesn't try to conceal his smile. Taiketsu gives the three of them an angry hum. Find a seat anywhere there's room. Aneko instructs them as she leads them to a table that is laden with publications. Dryly, so the floor? Shinso asks, pushing a few books aside to create space. Aneko laughs and tilts her head back. I like you, you remind me of Kyodai. Little bro still won't sit with me, huh? Well, it's probably for the best. His thoughts are so dull and slow they wear me down sometimes. She examines their vacant expressions. Our quirk is sibling telepathy. Whenever we're within 30 meters of each other, we're able to hear each other's thoughts. Convenient when playing Pictionary, not so much when you're trying to study and your brother has a stupid pop song stuck in his head. Anyway, she raises both of her hands. Back to business. I need a project to impress my teachers for the sports festival and it sounds like you need some advice. Which one of you is the quirkless kid who wants to be a hero? Everyone looks at Izuku. You, really? I'm not a lot to work with, but if anyone can make you a star, it'll be me. Did Kyodai tell you our Uncle Nashi is quirkless too? I have a soft spot for your plight. Izuku snaps, I'm not disabled you know, as this is becoming a bit tiresome. Korudo and Patrick appear a little sheepish, but Aneko doesn't seem to mind. I'm not fragile or helpless or someone to be pitied. I'm just me, and just because I happen to be quirkless doesn't make me any less capable or mean I need to be treated differently. I was wondering if you had any steel in your spine. Good, you're going to need it. Other kids in Class 1J are analyzing the hero kids and you've got some stiff competition. Acid, steel, half hot half cold, those kids have some impressive quirks. You'll need everything you've got just to keep up. She looks at him like a predator and folds her fingers together. So tell me what you've got going for you. Please don't be shy. Modesty only works for clothing sizes and feminine products. When Izuku says, oh, okay, he stumbles. While his friends added a few more qualities he hadn't thought of, such as his drive, compassion, resilience, and propensity to be underestimated by almost everyone, Izuku outlines his greatest strengths, which include his martial arts, analytical abilities, and adaptability. Aneko hums as she switches between talking, taking notes, and frantically typing on her phone, giving the impression that she is having several conversations at once. Observing her was dizzying, so it's understandable why Fuyuko needed a rest. She puts down her phone and leans forward with a serious expression, saying, okay, I can make this work. Everyone likes a good underdog story, so I'll put together a profile, but here's my main advice for you, quirkless boy. The number of transfers to heroics is astronomically low and UA just let quirkless students into the school a few years ago, so if you're going to do this, you need to go all the way. You seem kind of shy, which is cute and has its own appeal, but it's not going to win you any medals, not when you're up against people with downright terrifying quirks. You need to make yourself stand out as much as possible and, more importantly, you need to win. Got it? Izuku says, I got it, thanks, with consideration. Although he had already considered it, Seeing it so clearly stated helped him to focus. Although he isn't particularly ostentatious, he is confident that he can think of something. After picking up her phone again, Aneko immediately resumes texting. "What do you need from support?" she asks. "I'm assuming some equipment. Since the general, support and business aren't held to the same standards as heroics, they're allowed to use their gear during the sports festival. That's less than a month away, so you'll need to get your things together now." "Why yeah," Izuku says, nodding as he takes his notes out of his bag. "I need a couple of things. I need a bow staff, like in martial arts, but I need it to be durable enough to stand up against whatever quirks people can throw at me. Also I'll need some lightweight, flexible protection, mostly gloves and boots. At some point later, I'd love a belt of sorts to keep things like smoke bombs and other things in, but I don't think I'll really need that right now. Maybe if I get into heroics," he says as he flips his notebook around and presents it to Aneko. She glances at the page for a moment before turning back to her phone. I see," she says. "Okay, I know a girl in support who might be able to help you out. She usually likes things with a little more flourish, but she owes me 'cause I didn't rat on her when I caught her trying to improve the school's ventilation system." Aneko continues to type quickly. "I'm sending her your info to see if she's interested. Anyone else here want to be a hero? Don't be shy now." Says Korudo. Shinso starts. "I'm going to transfer to one of the hero classes. I have a brainwashing quirk and I'm not afraid to do whatever is necessary to get there." "Oh, you're spunky. I like it. You and I are going to talk some more," Aneko says with a smile to Shinso. She continues, "And you, my dear," gesturing to Izuku, "are going to meet Hatsume-mei. I hope you got your fill of lunch 'cause you're going to be spending the rest of the period in the student workshop going over your blueprints. Try not to die." Izuku says, "I'm sorry, what?" Instead, "Business girl. Where's my victim? You said he was plain, but they all look plain to me." Exclaiming as she pushes up some huge goggles off her face smeared with dirt, a girl with a busty pink hair appears behind Aneko. She has a slight smoke odor, and it's close enough to Kachon's that it makes Izuku uneasy. Izuku is starting to question if this was a wise decision. "I have a couple of projects going on now, but I have 20 minutes with nothing to do, so I might as take this on. It sounds a bit boring, but, who knows, it might end up being interesting." Taketsu points to him and declares, "It's him," utterly discrediting him. "Have fun. Bring him back in one piece. He's kind of the glue holding our little group together." Izuku whispers, "Oh, you are so going to get it when we train this afternoon," as he is physically dragged from his chair. Taketsu says, "That's only if you come back," and waves cheekily. He is given a somber look by Patrick and Korudo, as though he were leaving for a firing squad rather than a consultation. He doesn't find working with Hatsume to be as terrible as he had first thought. Despite the chaos and clutter in her workshop, she had no trouble navigating around the various pieces of scrap and junk. She was obviously a very committed individual who gave her all to her work. Izuku discovered that he liked that about her, and her innate passion for what she did excited him to share his thoughts. She offered some helpful suggestions for improvement after he explained what he was looking for in her, including the material and measurements. Some of them were good, anyway. He was not equipping his boots with rocket thrusters, regardless of how awesome they appeared. He was almost taken aback by how quickly the afternoon classes had passed when the warning bell rang. He leaves her with his phone number and promises to contact her if he thinks of anything else. Izuku jogs back to class with a sense of joy and lightness. This was just one more step toward his objective. Shortly before the last bell rings, he slips into his desk. Aneko seemed to have enjoyed the remainder of lunch while chatting with the others while their teacher prepared the food. In order to help him and Shinso enhance their image for the festival, she was going to create a profile for them both. Class starts after the instructor clears their throat. He spends most of the fifth period arguing with his friends via eyebrow. Although he feels guilty for not paying attention, he feels free to enjoy it because friends are still somewhat of a novelty. He's also doing fairly well in history, anyway. When a cell phone rings loudly close to the end of class, Patrick uses his facial expressions alone to express his thoughts on Korudo's most recent remark. The teacher blushes as she answers the phone and says, "Excuse me, class. I should take this. Please be quiet. We'll resume in just a moment." The class, including Izuku and his friends, bursts into laughter and conversation as soon as she turns. Patrick says, "Dude, I am so pumped for this afternoon," as he delivers a few punches. You were so awesome the other day in gym. I can't wait until I can do things like that. Things like that take time, Shinso comments quietly. But I am interested in. Their teacher hisses, will you be quiet? With such startling severity that everyone falls silent. She turns to face the now quiet classroom once more and says, this is serious, I need to hear this. No, I can't believe that, on our campus. That's terrible, was anyone hurt? Oh my, okay, yes, I'll take care of the students. Keep me informed. She ends the call and looks at her phone for a few more seconds, as though she needs to adjust her perspective on the world. Class, I'm afraid something terrible has happened. I don't have all the details, but it seems that villains have attacked the USJ facility where one of the hero classes and their teachers were training this afternoon. It looks like it was a deliberate attack. Your homeroom teacher is going to come back in to dismiss you all. The school is being evacuated. Izuku has the impression that the floor has collapsed beneath him. UA being openly attacked by villains. Although it was unprecedented, the ramifications are horrifying. Was there anyone injured? Which hero class was at USJ today? He freezes. What class did Kachan attend? He quickly sends Kachan a message after reaching into his bag for his phone. He is certain that it is the same number because he has owned the same phone since middle school. He would stop at nothing to receive an irate text telling him to get lost. Instead, the lonesome text remains there with no sign that it has been read or answered. A few moments later, as their history professor hastily leaves, Shiora-sensei bursts into the room, his face as grim and menacing as Izuku has ever seen it. So you've all heard the news. USJ, one of our training facilities, was attacked this afternoon by a large group of villains. Most of the school's heroes are now on site processing the captured villains. As of right now, the situation is being contained. No word yet on who did this or if the leaders were able to be taken or not. As a measure of caution, we will be waiting until we have some heroes back on campus before sending you all home. Without even raising his hand, Izuku demands, what class was attacked? Was anyone hurt? It was 1A, the other hero class was scheduled to be there tomorrow, but that's obviously not going to happen now. Right now, the only confirmed injuries are the pros who were there during the incident. They were injured severely enough to require care in a hospital. Sensei takes a breath. As I said, we don't know a lot right now, but it seems there were minor injuries among the students too. Izuku thinks he's going to be ill, certain that he was in 1A. Izuku exclaims once more, we can't just sit here, we have to do something. He can feel himself starting to hyperventilate, and there is static beneath his skin. He recalls how terrified Kachan appeared as he suffocated and how he was buried in sludge. He imagines that his friend is going through that again, and perhaps this time, help didn't reach him in time. Sensei says, calm down, Midoriya, with such vigor that Izuku's vision returns to normal. I respect your feelings, but you are a student and it is our job to protect you, right here and right now. I understand this is very distressing for all of you, but I need you to conduct yourself in a manner befitting UA students. Izuku tries to remain silent despite his trembling fists on his desk. We're waiting for the heroes to come back and give us the all clear, then we'll be letting you go. All of you will go straight home and stay there. Please walk in pairs if you can, says Sensei. Motome inquires, what about tomorrow? Will there be class? There's no official word yet, but I'm betting school will be closed tomorrow, but don't use that as an excuse to slack off. Now more than ever, Japan needs to see UA as a symbol of strength and resilience. It's up to all of you to represent the values of this institution. Shiora-sensei glances at his cell phone. Alright, grab your things and line up quietly. Looks like they're beginning evacuation procedures. We may run into some of the pros and hero students, but please control your curiosity, they've been through hell today. It is a painfully tense and silent walk through the corridors. Just as solemn and quiet, a few other classes are marching in their own procession. Usually so noisy, UA now feels like a graveyard. With all the tension building inside of him, Izuku feels like he's about to blow up. He's holding his phone in one hand, hoping Kachan will return his call. If UA's interior resembled a tomb, its exterior resembled a battlefield. Everywhere you look, you see heroes and police. While they hustle back and forth, dragging off villains and exploring the grounds, Izuku is unable to even keep track of them all. He hears one or two helicopters circling the property above them. His mother must be extremely frightened if she is watching this on TV. When Izuku learns about Kachan, he must check in with her. He observes Blood King examining a few heroic children who are sitting on the front lawn, battered but eventually unharmed. They don't include Kachan. Izuku looks at his phone once more, sends another message, and then shoves it into his pocket. Present Mike yells, "Keep back everyone, we're bringing in the injured," loudly. Izuku sees two stretchers being hauled out of an ambulance, and his heart begins to race. The voice hero goes on in a softer voice, saying, "Take the kid to recovery room A, we also need someone to contact his parents." The other guy goes straight to recovery girl's office, he's a special patient. Izuku appears to slow down to a crawl for the next few seconds. He nearly misses the boy being taken away on the stretcher because he is momentarily preoccupied with the bustle going on around him. When he sees the prone figure, his breath catches in his throat. Even though he's dressed up and covered in blood, Izuku would be able to identify that spiky blonde hair anywhere. He yells, "Kachan," and, as before, he rushes mindlessly in the direction of his childhood friend. While Sensei yells in the background, "Midoriya, back in line right now." Izuku's entire world has shrunk to Kachan's bloodied and bruised face, his expression nearly soft in unconsciousness. Izuku struggles in the grip as two hands attempt to pull him back. As he gives his teacher a look that suggests he would need to be pulled back into line, Izuku yells back, "Please sir, I know him. We live near each other. I know his parents, I can contact them to let them know what happened, I can keep watch over him. Please, you can't make me leave him." "I won't leave him," Izuku says. Even though he is playing a risky game, he is unable to care. "I don't care if I get punished, but you can't let him be alone at a time like this," Izuku says. Present Mike lets him go after Chiura-sensei whispers, "It's okay, Yamada, you can let him go," allowing Izuku to approach Kachan's stretcher. In case they try to drag him away once more, he grabs the sides. Sensei hisses back, "Be quiet and stay out of the way," as if to warn that there will be a reckoning later. The threat looms large, but Izuku has no time to worry about himself when Kachan could be dying any moment. "If I hear that you so much as breathed wrong, you are out of there and out of this school. Do you understand me, Midoriya?" As he jogs to keep up with the medics, he nods back, "Yes sensei," looking for any indication that Kachan will be alright. Present Mike remarks, "You're a brave kid, but I admire your spirit." With his hand lightly gripping the side of the stretcher close to his friend's face, Izuku swallows the lump in his throat and says, "Don't worry, your friend is going to be just fine. He's pretty banged up now, but Recovery Girl is one of the best docs around. He doesn't know what the world is getting to, where Kachan of all people could get hurt and Yue of all places would be openly attacked in such a way." Izuku shuts his eyes and suppresses his tears. All he knows is that he will confront whatever lies ahead and make every effort to be ready for whatever storm it may bring.
I will continue the story in next part. Till then, bye bye.